Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA WhatIf 2.0, with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Met Dazai in a World of Quirks? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Boring. So very boring. 20 years of being seated on this train, being taken to God knows where. He would have jumped off by now if he wasn't still a bit intrigued. Time had stopped. He didn't notice at first till a group of teenagers came in, raving about new music and release dates. It was odd. He almost didn't believe it, but it was the undeniable truth. 20 years, he had not changed a bit. Not a strand of hair had lengthened, he had not gotten taller, his nails had not grown, his body had been paused. He was a bit peeved to never be able to fully experience human growth, but the need to know how this was possible clouded over wanting to leave. He did wonder what his friends had been up to a few times, but did he truly care? He couldn't tell. He always had such troubles with connections with others. For now, he would say yes, he did care. If anything, he was at least curious. Many questions bubbled in him which he had no answers to. At some point he began to think this could be a punishment for all he's done. After all, this happens to him once he's truly settled down and on the path that would grant him the right to say he is a good man. But no matter what he did every day, he was still the demon prodigy. A mafia executive, Mori's right hand. A demonic man with a demonic past masquerading as a good man. Then there was also the matter of his ability, no longer human, a fitting name to who he was. Dazai had spent nights just thinking about his power and what it truly meant. Everyone he had met had a power that seemed intertwined with their personality. So what does that say about himself? That he is not a human like the rest. He is something not. Perhaps he truly is the demon he was branded as, or maybe he was just someone who shouldn't exist at all. He was the only one paused on the train. That must mean something. Shouldn't it? The conductor changed every day, the passengers were all different and the ones he did recognize had aged. He was the only one who stayed the same, stuck in some sort of limbo. He laughed to himself, all this time and he still hadn't been able to figure anything out. This could not be due to an ability, it wouldn't work on him, so how? It was always possible that he did just die and get trapped in limbo, not the worst outcome, but he knew he deserved to burn. His sins were unforgivable. Even a god known for mercy wouldn't spare him. The amount of boredom from the same routine of riding this train, it was almost unbearable at times. Almost. The end was coming, he could feel it. He spent his time on the train toying with the large number of bandages that loitered around his body. He did not need to change them while on the train, even if he wanted to replace them, he had nowhere to do it or any spares on him. The bathrooms were disgusting and that was something coming from him. He hadn't even needed to go in there at all, the pause had deprived him of feeling hunger and thirst as well, so he was free to simply do nothing all day. The man ran a bandaged hand through his brown fluffy hair and leaned back in his seat. There wasn't anyone interesting on the train today, no one he would find interest in to talk with. That's irritating, he could usually find at least one person who would indulge him until their stop. He tilted his head back to stare at the ceiling above him. His mind began to wander as it did often on his ride. Instead of thinking of his fellow detectives, he thought of the Port Mafia, specifically Chuya. Would he be happy about Dazai's disappearance or would he not care at all? They all probably thought he had finally managed to kill himself, a perfect suicide as he always said. That or they thought something bad happened. Being in the Mafia put so much blood on his hands, such evil things he had done, but he still held a fondness for that time. Does that make him even worse of a person, to not care for the deaths he caused? Instead of feeling guilt, here he was, remembering the faces of those he killed and the rush of adrenaline he got while doing it. His heart racing during these missions, the satisfaction of his plans working perfectly, and even the small bits of praise he got from his success was something he remembered as positive. The blood and carnage also filled him with something he could not place. If anything, he was more enthralled by the bright red blood surrounding him. All humans had blood, even he. Is that why he liked to see himself bleed? Of course, his most fond memories of this time were the moments he spent with Oda and Ango. He wished he could go back to these times, just having drinks together and talking about whatever they pleased, no sense of formality or the mafia hierarchy hanging over their heads. And how could he ever forget Chuya, his dear partner? Two halves of a whole. Sukoku. Dare he even say soulmates? They were, no they still are, feared by many. They worked well together, practically made for each other. He missed Chuya. They had their fair share of arguments over big and petty things, but they also had a fair share of positive times. Chuya with beautiful red hair, beautiful bright eyes, and a temper that was just as short as he was. Chuya with a god living inside him, a man with so much life in him. He was so, how could Dazai even describe him? He was so human. He was much too loyal, he was full of emotions, and he was perfect in his own way. How silly the two of them are, a man who isn't human and a man who is much more human than he thinks. Dazai didn't like to think too much of the mafia. It made him doubt himself, doubt if Oda really thought he would be able to stay on the side that saves people. Both sides are the same to him, so why should it matter if he kills to save or kill to hurt? Death is caused either way, is it not? No matter, as much as he wishes to watch as Chuya slaughters the enemy with ease and paints the scene with a beautiful red, he would do his best to not be tempted and stray. He didn't want to hurt the new people in his life. It would certainly break Atsushi's heart if he returned to his old ways. It was in the past now, yet he still had urges to be violent that he ignored. The addiction to this pain he brought to himself would never leave him. Dazai bit the inside of his cheek. Alone was better for him even if it was on this shitty train ride. He did not need to have the burden of friends if he was alone. Oda and Ango are prime examples of that. He began to lightly drum his fingers on his thigh and sighed, "Oda, I am truly sorry for not being able to do as you asked." Dazai thought to himself before he closed his eyes, maybe he would sleep even if he didn't need it. He could still nap to pass the time even if it was unnecessary. Better than being bored, and with that his vision turned dark and he fell asleep. His dreams here were always odd. He dreamt of himself floating in a dark void, a black void with seemingly no end or start. His body was laid back, dressed in only a dress shirt and black slacks. His bandages were coming a bit undone but otherwise were still on him. They were practically a second skin to him. Up until now, he always wore his coat. Sometimes the coat was his usual tan coat. In other versions of this dream it was his old black mafia coat, but now his coat was missing. He felt odd without the usual weight of it on him. Still, the dream started just like the others: silence, darkness, peace. He was weightless. It felt like being underwater and sounded like it too. Floating in pure darkness, he felt tranquil in this environment, so very calm. The dream was perfect. He was startled when heard a voice echoing in the void. Talking was never in the dream. He tried to listen but his hearing was muffled. He could barely make out any words besides the final sentence. "This is the last stop." He bolted up, his mind back in the real world. That dream, it must mean something. Final stop? Was the train ride over? Would he be able to find out what was going on? The man clenched his fists in his lap. What did it mean? He was cut from his musing when the train began to give an announcement. "This is our final stop. All riders, please get off at this point." He titled his head, "Final stop?" So, this was where he was to go. Dazai stood up to move towards the entrance. As he did, a woman bumped into him and dropped a duffel bag into his arms before disappearing into the crowd. He looked at the bag. Dazai Osamu. The bag was even labeled with his name. He held it close to his side and began to walk out of the station. Dazai's first thoughts of this place was, what the actual fuck? At first, he assumed there were people with abilities after seeing an invisible girl, but after further research and seeing too many weird animal people or people with extra limbs and even pink skin, he found out these were not the abilities that he knew. They were quirks. His first plan was to test his ability to see if it worked here. He could feel no longer human flowing in him but wasn't sure if it would be effective on these quirks. He tested it by walking up to an invisible girl and lightly grabbing a strand of hair. She became visible. The people she was walking with yelled out in shock at her looks now being present to them. She appeared confused too, but as she went to look down at herself, Dazai let go. Invisible once again. His ability worked, the same as normal. He did a quick test on whether if a quirk hit him, would it even affect him by provoking a blonde boy who had a very short fuse. The explosions went towards him, but with a flash of blue light, they disappeared, which left the blonde with a look of pure confusion. Dazai had already fled the scene after getting the results he needed and made his way back to his apartment. The duffel bag he was given on his first day had been filled with money, keys to a house, all legal documents he would need, a change of clothing, as well as his favorite brand of bandages. What a great gift! He didn't bother to dwell on how this money was gotten and if the papers were technically legal or not. Who cares? It's not like he hadn't done worse. The apartment was nice, small but roomy. He didn't really need much space, so he was rather pleased. He was aware he did need a job though. He was given a lot of money, but it wouldn't last forever. He decided to get an interesting job, so he became a bartender. If you asked him if he did it to remember his past, he would deny it. It wasn't too difficult to master making drinks, and once he did figure it out, he was granted a position at a very fancy bar in the middle of the city. Being in a bar was nice, even if it was a loud and crowded one. At least he could find people to converse with. The most interesting ones always end up sitting at the bar instead of dancing. This world had such a strong sense of laws too. How disappointing. He had first figured this place was the future, but according to a public library computer, his world simply did not exist. No port mafia, no ADA, no abilities. It was a new dimension. He was rather intrigued with the idea of being a villain. From what he had seen, the villains who bothered to explain themselves had seemingly valid reasons. The heroes and their laws were rather ridiculous. The new generation of heroes was pretty much groomed to be corrupted and only think of the law as some sort of Bible. No room for improvement, it was either good or bad. Dazai would bet these heroes would even aggressively arrest a homeless woman trying to steal a small piece of bread for her children if she used her quirk to do so. It was kind of embarrassing, to be honest. Dazai stretched to crack his back. He wanted to become a villain while also keeping tabs on the heroes. Maybe he could even rebuild the port mafia. Maybe even a mix of the ADA and the mafia. That would be fun, right? With a soft giggle, he began to sing his typical suicide song and started heading to the shower. Time to apply for a job. It took a lot less effort than he thought it would to apply for a job. Honestly, this was a super popular hero school. Did they think no one would try to fake an application to kill from the inside? Whatever, better for him anyway. The form was pretty basic, with dumb questions like, "What's your quirk?" and "Why do you want to teach?" They didn't even ask for his criminal record. Not that he had one in this world yet. He had been slowly working his way to find the LOV, but they were actually well guarded for a bunch of idiots. The ADA and Port Mafia could easily crush them. Well, those groups could crush the Hero Society too. Awkward. You'd think the future would hold some cool secret weapons, but everyone relied on their quirks too much. Pull out a gun and everyone is dead. Dazai pressed the send icon on his laptop and officially sent in his job application. He did need to stand out to get chosen, so he may have lied just a little on his reasoning of why he wanted this job. He doubted, "I'm from a different world and very bored, so I'm going to rebuild my illegal mafia organization with this school's resources and villains on my side," would cut it. He had to add some spice, so a dash of his own personal trauma that made him want to teach others to become heroes had been added too. His ability alone would attract him attention. No longer human was a weird name and didn't outright say what he could do. He didn't bother to explain it. If the school wanted to know, they could ask at his future job interview. Dazai did a little spin in his chair and stood. He closed his laptop and went to the kitchen to stuff canned crab down his throat before he went off to his current job. He muttered, "I better get this interview. I'm a great mentor." He laughed lightly and stuck his long fingers into the can he had pried open to shove the chunks of meat in his mouth. After slurping down his meal, he washed his hands and dressed in basic clothing. Black turtleneck sweater, black jeans, and belt along with his tan coat from the ADA. A gun laid hidden in the jacket. It doesn't hurt to be prepared. He grabbed his wallet, keys, and phone before slipping on his boots and heading out the door. He had gotten a motorcycle after he crashed the first car he had. How was he supposed to know it went so fast? The motorcycle was easier anyway, even if it did remind him of Chuya. He didn't get an ugly pink color though. His bike was black. because unlike some people, namely a certain ginger, he didn't want to look stupid. Dazai kicked a lanky leg over the bike, settled himself onto the seat, and started the vehicle to begin the drive. It was a semi-long ride, but he did like to feel the wind in his hair and see the city lights, so he didn't complain. He had actually named his bike, in memory of his old life, Tainted Sorrows. He did steal the motorcycle idea from the slug, so it was a nice thing to do. The bar had been annoying at first with how much the other workers and customers would stare at his bandages. Some even asked to see what was under them. How rude. His manager also told him to take the bandages off, but after being hit with a deadpan stare from Dazai, she decided to just leave him alone. How can people have extra arms and other mutations but bandages were considered weird? He had literally seen a dog person glaring at a cat with murderous intent, but he was the weird one. Dazai parked his bike and chained it up to prevent stealing, then walked into the bar to clock in for his shift. He walked to the back to put his things into his locker and put on the stupid apron he was forced to wear. Dazai fixed up his hair, double-checked that he looked presentable, and officially started his shift. He stood behind the bar with all the alcoholic drinks. His mind had instantly thought of his little chibi when he saw all the expensive wine. Chia would end up blackout drunk if he went to this place. Poor slug, he was too small to have a high tolerance to alcohol. A small smile spread across his face at the thought of his old partner. What a silly dog he was. A man wearing a hood over his head sat down on one of the soft stools and placed his hands on the table with his pinky raised up. Odd, but who was Dazai to judge? The brunette moved to stand in front of the man from behind the counter. "What can I get you?" he asked. The man looked up at Dazai. Honey brown eyes met blood red. The man stared intently at Dazai. The former executive raised an eyebrow. He was completely unaffected by the bloodlust being released. The man appeared to be stuck in a mix of irritation and confusion as to why the bartender didn't flinch in the slightest. Dazai shrugged at the man. "Do you want to order anything?" he asked again with an annoyed tone. "Or did you come here to give the workers dirty looks?" The man stood up abruptly and reached his arm out to grab Dazai's neck. His middle finger was left hovering above the bartender's skin. "Do you know who I am?" Dazai shrugged and grinned. "Nope." The man tightened his hold and slowly began to bring his middle finger down. "I am Shigaraki Tamura, the leader of the League of Villains. You got unlucky to run into me while I'm in a bad mood." Shigaraki's lips stretched into a feral smile as he fully gripped Dazai's neck. Nothing happened. The villain made a tiny sound of shock because his quirk wasn't working. He moved his hand back and grabbed a cup sitting on the counter with all 5 fingers. The cup turned to ashes. Dazai bursted out into giggles. "Sorry? Ha, that was just really funny." The brunette had to hold his sides from how hard he was laughing. Shigaraki growled in frustration. "How did you do that?" He demanded an answer from the maniac. Dazai held a hand up and slowly stifled his laughter. "My quirk?" He grabbed Shigaraki's hand and intertwined their fingers. "No quirk has any effect on me, and I can also turn off other people's quirks while I touch them. Isn't it cool, Mr. Villain?" Shigaraki's mouth was hanging open. He had only ever seen one nullification quirk user, Eraserhead, but even he could be affected by quirks. This man was invincible to quirk-based attacks? "Oh, I'm Dazai Osamu. Is your little gang still looking for members? Or do I need to fill out an application sheet?" Shigaraki yanked his hand out of Dazai's hold before answering. "No application needed. This quirk you have is enough for me to want you in the group." Dazai nodded and handed Shigaraki a small piece of paper that he probably ripped off from a receipt. It had a phone number written on it in neat handwriting. "Feel free to text at any time. I'm eager to work with you. Hopefully, you don't disappoint me." With that, Dazai waved, blew a cheeky kiss at Shigaraki, and went to tend to the other people seated at the bar. Dazai watched the villain carefully put the paper into his hoodie and walk out of the establishment. He was making progress fast. Now if only that stupid rat would answer his email by the next morning, it would be perfect. Dazai had a small hunch the group would be rather useless. After watching how they fought on the news, it was disappointing, to say the least. He could take them in as his subordinates, but it would be a lot of work, and he also doubted they would even listen to him. He'd see how the meeting with the whole group goes and make his choice then. He could always make his own little gang with a stupid name if it went bad. He didn't have very high expectations anyway. He really just wanted to test their Quirks vs no longer human. He was pretty sure there was a member who could take on someone's form by drinking their blood. Would that work on him? Technically they were not touching him, but it was his blood. Would his blood stop the quirk being activated on him, or maybe stop the person from using their quirk in general until his blood is out of their system? And there's a portal guy. Would the portals work on him? Or would they disappear if he steps in them? So many questions, but he'd get his answers soon enough. That overgrown rat principal seriously better email him back soon though. He was super curious about what UA was like. Sure, he heard of it all the time, but the news always ends up messing up in some way. Seeing it firsthand was the better option, so teaching would be perfect. If only he was still a teen, he could have applied as a student. Or if he was Chuya's height, then he could definitely pretend to be a student. Maybe being short does have some advantages. The following morning consisted of Dazai's tiny celebration dance. He had gotten the interview. Even if that rodent found him suspicious, there was a high chance he would still be hired just to satisfy the principal's curiosity. There was no proof of his previous crimes either, so the mouse would have to investigate head-on. What better way than to keep Dazai close? That mouse needed to get its priorities straight, letting in someone who might be dangerous to serve as entertainment or keeping the UA students safe. Seems that the mouse is never worried for the students even though they've gotten themselves into plenty of trouble already. What an odd school. Dazai took it easy till his interview. He was going to get there early though, just to look around and maybe find a student or other teacher to talk to. There was a teacher there with a quirk that was similar to no longer human. It was weaker though. The user could only stop quirks while their eyes were open, and other quirks could still affect them. That must suck. Dazai just needed to get close enough to lay a finger on his attacker to stop their powers, so no eye drops for him. His alarm to start to get ready rang from his phone and he smiled deviously. It's time already? He got off of his very comfortable spot on the couch and went to chance. He didn't bother to dress more professionally than normal. The biggest difference was that he wore his black coat from the Port Mafia instead of the ADA one. He slipped on a white turtleneck sweater and ripped black jeans. His bandages stayed as normal. Dazai also needed some sort of weapon that would not attract questions, so he put a small switchblade into his pants pocket. A gun would definitely get him into trouble at a hero school. After getting all his junk together, he headed out. He chose to take the subway instead of his bike. He could overhear some gossip about UA, and he was too lazy to follow road laws today. Who knew being a law-abiding citizen was so hard? Dazai got onto the subway and sat down near a group of students. He put on his headphones and decided to listen to some music on his way there. He had listened to the kids a bit, but they were going on about Kamita kissing Hinata or something like that. Irrelevant information for his goals. The ride was uneventful. He spent it with music blasting into his ears and thinking over any possible questions he might be asked. It should be easy enough. The rodent was supposedly very smart, but Dazai wasn't called the Demon Prodigy Executive without being able to unsmart the smartest. He got off at his stop with a hop in his step. He was pretty excited about this. Living life on the legal side was so boring. At least at the ADA he had things to do. From annoying Kanikata to fighting with naughty ability users. He could even visit his favorite hat rack if he wanted to. This world was too simple for his taste. The former mafia member hummed quietly to himself as he walked towards UA. The school was rather impressive. It was huge and had a futuristic vibe to it. Dazai walked up to the entrance. He had been instructed to just enter because the system was aware a visitor would be arriving. His eyes scanned the area to see if there were any spots of the school that stood out. Nothing suspicious, at least not that he could see. Dazai went into the building and wandered aimlessly for a while. The school had really cool gyms for training. He wondered if he would be allowed to teach the students how to use weapons. As his future lesson plan ideas circled through his mind, he turned a corner and slammed into another person. Dazai landed on the ground. A tiny gasp of surprise had left him when he landed. He had definitely not expected that. Geez. He should have been paying more attention. He looked up to be met with a pair of tired eyes staring at him. A hand was reached out which he took. Once he was on his feet, he laughed. What a way to meet. Dazai rocked back and forth on the heels of his shoes. I'm Dazai Osamu. I'll probably be your future coworker. The other man sighed quietly. I'm Aizawa Shoyuda. Dazai raised a thumbs up. You teach 1A, right? Aizawa nodded in confirmation. Man, this teacher wasn't talkative at all. You're also known as Eraserhead, aren't you? Our quirks are similar. This statement got the other man's attention. How did you? What do you mean by similar? Dazai smirked inwardly. Well, you can shut off a quirk with your eyes open and I can shut off a quirk by touching someone. And no quirk affects me. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly. No quirk affects you? How is that possible? It is what it is. No quirk will hurt me. Even if it's something like a person using their quirk to fire an explosion at me, it won't work. It'll get cancelled out and disappear before it can hit me. Isn't it cool? The sleep teacher nodded. It is very interesting. I'll be excited to work with you in the future. Aizawa shook Dazai's hand. A small blue light sparkled when they made contact. Aizawa looked at Dazai with an expression of skepticism. Dazai stared back. His eyes went dark. A small amount of bloodlust left him to make Aizawa uncomfortable. Dazai waved, keeping the same expression, and walked away to the direction of the office. The bandaged ability user grinned to himself. He had already met one of the main reasons he wanted to get a job here. That man was definitely suspicious of him too, which would add to the fun. It was pretty risky to scare the guy on purpose, but whatever. The hero had no proof he was up to no good, so he was in the clear. Dazai stopped in front of the rodent's room and knocked. He opened the door and went inside after the rat told him to enter. That rodent was actually kinda cute. He was expecting a nasty hairy rat, but this was a pleasant surprise. Dazai sat down across from the principal and put on his best people-pleaser smile. Hello, sir. My name is Dazai Osamu. I'm sure you know that already though. The animal laughed. I do know that. I'm Nizu, the headmaster of UA. Nizu reached a paw out to shake Dazai's hand. After the small introduction, the real fun began. Well, Dazai, can you explain your quirk? The name no longer human isn't very descriptive. Nizu started. He was definitely curious about this quirk, especially after he touched the man in front of him because he felt his mind go blank for the mere seconds they held contact, almost like he went back to being a normal animal. My quirk allows me to cancel anyone's quirk as long as I am touching them. I also cannot be harmed by any quirks. For example, if a quirk user fired a blast of fire at me, the fire would disappear with a flash of blue light due to my quirk. Super strength doesn't work on me. It'll be like fighting a normal person with normal strength. I can cancel quirks that make people invisible, and you, since you have an intelligence quirk, contact with you would probably revert your brain to that of a normal animal. Get it? Nizu hummed in thought. I did feel my thought process get stopped. That is a very impressive power. Have you seen if it works on people with mutant quirks? Like extra body parts or colorful skin? Dazai shook his head. No, I haven't come in contact with anyone with those types of quirks, but I theorize that they would revert to a normal form. 2 arms, 2 legs, and normal skin color. Pretty much look like a regular human. I do not believe it would hurt either, since it would just happen with a flash of light. Now that I think about it, I did have a student who could turn into a white tiger and keep some body parts in tiger form. If I touched him, he would revert to full human even if he still had an arm or leg transformed. He said it never hurt, it only felt tingly when it happened. Dazai smiled fondly when thinking of Atsushi. He truly is such a sweet kid. Nizu listened closely to Dazai's words. Do you have any other examples of your quirk in action? If used correctly, that power could really make you unstoppable. I do have more to tell. I had another student whose quirk was a black beast that he controlled from his coat. The beast was built for destruction. I was able to show him ways to use his quirk for protection even if he did believe he could only be destructive, but my 2 students got into a fight. The tiger was in the middle of pouncing onto the other, and the beast had its jaws open, ready to devour the tiger. I had to step in. I simply tapped the tiger's nose and left the beast to try to eat my hand. A large blue light surrounded them and both quirks were no longer being used. The beast was returned to resting in my old student's coat and the other boy reverted back to human. He did pass out, but I believe it was because he was still inexperienced with his power. I had only recently started to be his mentor while I was in charge of the other boy for quite some time. The rodent's ears perked up at the last statement. He didn't have control? How old is he? Most children without control of their quirk can't fight, much less have power over their transformations. Also, how long did you teach the other boy? Dazai was a bit peeved by ending up needing to talk about his mafia past since it added extra work to keep all information of illegal business out of the story, but it was worth it. He wondered if Nizu would be able to pick up any holes in his words. Well, to answer your first questions, he had zero control of his power when we first met. He had been mistreated in an orphanage and was not told he had a quirk. The orphanage was made for quirkless children, so when my student ended up developing a quirk, especially one as powerful as the one he had, they kept it a secret. The orphanage didn't wish to ruin their reputation of being quirkless friendly, so they told all the other children to keep quiet about it too. He was abused by the people in charge and eventually kicked out at 18. Also, his quirk is called Beast Beneath the Moonlight. I met him while swimming in a river. He thought I was drowning since I did get stuck on a branch and ended upside down with my head under. Telling his future boss that he was a suicidal maniac was definitely not going to happen. The mouse didn't need to know about his personal issues. He rescued me. I was touched by his actions and noticed he was very skinny and looked sick. So after a small talk, I took him to eat and he joined the small detective agency I worked at. Now, he had no control of his quirk as I said before, but our boss's quirk was perfect for people like him. Nizu was listening closely. How would someone else's quirk be able to help a fully grown teenager control their power? It took a long time to master control. Even pro heroes in the top rankings still had some issues with their quirks. My boss has a very skillful quirk. It doesn't really help him but helps others. It's known as all men are created equal. To sum it up, his power helps level and control his workers' quirks. My student was able to manage his transformation better with the boss's quirk helping. His quirk can only be activated on people who work for him. I don't know much about how it works. He's a very secretive man. His power is really a gift. We have another member who we rescued from a very toxic situation, and with his help, she began to get better at using her quirk. Nizu clapped his paws together. Whoa, that's marvelous. Can you tell me more about the other boy? With the beast he controls? He was my old student. He didn't technically graduate from my teachings. I just quit that job to work for the detective agency. He looks up to me, honestly, in an unhealthy way. I admit, he was my first student and I was inexperienced in teaching, so he was like a guinea pig in my lessons. I learned from my mistakes on how I worked with him. I had to be more assertive and aggressive with him since he refused to listen when I was softer. I guess it depends on how the student reacts to how I teach them. My current student works much better with soft commands and taking it slow, but my old one was very hostile and felt the need to constantly prove himself as strong. He couldn't understand that his quirk could be used for more than just destruction. I am certain he believed he was made to be a murderous villain with how he worked his quirk. He did learn how to use his beast for protection and not just to attack. Since the beast can eat anything it is faced with, I instructed him to find a way to use that to protect himself from anything fired at him. He used the monster as a shield that could eat whatever was shot at him like bullets or knives. He can use the monster as stilts to stand on, use it like tentacles to stretch out and attack from afar. I'm impressed with how far he's come. Dazai placed his hands in his lap and waited for Nizu to speak again. That is all so thrilling to learn. How do you fight on the field since your quirk isn't built for combat? And how well do you get along with your coworkers? Well, I am skilled in using a gun and other weapons if I get into a hand-on-hand fight, but I usually set up traps or mind games to corner my opponent. I can fight. I'd say I'm good at it even if I'm only armed with my fists, so I don't doubt I can teach others to fight, but my specialty is my planning skills. I can come up with different ideas on spot to be put into action and, not to brag, they rarely ever fail. Coworkers, I get along with them well. I do enjoy teasing whoever I'm partnered with, but I get my work done as do they. I'm able to adjust how I work depending on my partner's quirk. My first partner had a very strong quirk, but he needed someone to be able to turn it off when it got out of control, so I was there for him. I did the planning and he would be the fighter. My partner at the detective agency's quirk was he could write anything in a notebook of his as long as it was the size of the book or smaller and have it conjured. We worked well together. He was very easy to instruct since he was a stickler for rules and listened well. The interview went very well. Niza did have a slight feeling of weariness of Dazai, but he ended up just assuming it was because of all the stress he had been under as of late. Class 1A was such a nightmare to keep away from trouble. Dazai was perfect to teach that class. His quirk could keep them under control without hurting himself as Aizawa did. He would be a huge help to Aizawa. That poor man was growing gray hairs from that group of students. Dazai could also be a trump card against villains. None of their quirks would work on him, so if he was to fight, let's say, the leader of the league, the heroes had a much higher chance of winning. Shigaraki didn't seem to know much combat and usually relied on his minions and his quirk to win fights. Dazai would definitely take the villain by surprise. Niza decided to hire Dazai to be an assistant to Aizawa and also observe/help All Might's class. All Might was a good man, but his teaching skills were not anything to brag about. After talking to Dazai to explain what position he would be getting and his pay, the two did the necessary paperwork for Dazai to start work in 2 days. Nizu's curiosity had been piqued by this man and he never backed away from a challenge. Once the newly hired teacher left, Nizu slumped onto his chair. Everything the man said was true. Nizu couldn't detect any hints of lying and he had high trust in his intelligence that he would be able to sense signs of lying. Even the calmest and collected people would slip and Nizu could spot it. Dazai may have not lied, but there was something sinister leaking out of the human. It was weird. That human made him feel uneasy but hadn't done anything to prompt that. Nizu was forced out of his thought process when he heard a knock on his door. It's Aizawa. That's new. Aizawa isn't the type to come visit for small talk. Something must have happened. Come in, close the door behind you. I have a feeling this is important. The teacher followed the instructions given before sitting down. Did you hire Dazai Osamu? Nizu nodded. I did. What of it? Aizawa shuddered slightly. I have a bad feeling about him. We need to be careful and keep eyes on that man. Meanwhile, Dazai sneezed. Was someone talking about him? He shrugged and went back to doing research on suicide methods that he hadn't tried. There had to be something interesting and painless to test while he was here. He did have to be careful of where he tried these out. He didn't need any of his new students to see him. It was the day before Dazai's first official teaching class. He didn't have to come to school today, but he claimed he wanted to see how things are run in UA. Aizawa wasn't very pleased with this man's presence as he was still very concerned that Dazai was a villain or at least known as a suspicious person that could be dangerous to have around. To his surprise, Dazai stayed out of everyone's field of view and was very quiet when he chose to enter a class. He had stayed in the 1B classes even though he was to teach 1A. That was a very odd choice if he was intending to sabotage the hero course, since villains would usually attack the main hero class. There was quiet chatter being spread through the halls of a super hot dude that was sitting in the back of classes. Some students debated if he was going to be a transfer, while others were just trying to find him again to bombard him with meaningless questions. Though they didn't have any luck finding him, the other teachers would simply shrug or avoid answering who the guy was. Soon the chatter turned to rumors, silly things like if he was a hallucination to him being a robot that is used to track their skills/improvements. Of course, the talk of this man eventually did reach the main hero course's ears. Mina was the first to talk of it during a free period the class had. Their teacher had gone to speak with another teacher and left the class to mingle until they returned. Guys, did you hear that the B classes have been seeing a really cute and mysterious guy wandering around there? Maybe he's a student, but they said he looked older than us. Like in his 20s. Well, he was in the back, so it could be that he really is a teenager and it was a trick of the light. She spoke loudly to attract the attention of the whole class. Hagakure was the first of the bunch to gossip with her. Oh my god. I saw him earlier. Mina squealed and prompted her to talk more. Even Ida began to listen to them. Alright, so he really is super cute and his voice is all deep and smooth. He's a dream man. His hair is fluffy brown and he's got these pretty dark brown eyes that kinda shine red. Uraraka shifted her seat to turn the girls. She giggled at the information of how this man looked. What? She might have a tiny crush on Midoriya, but that was irrelevant right now. What did he have on? You can always tell a lot about a person based on clothing. Ioma pipped up. That's why I always dress my best. Who knows if this outfit will end up my ghost outfit? Ignoring the comment of his death being in a UA uniform, his invisible classmate continued. He had a cool trench coat on, it was super swishy. He had these weird bandages all over though. Todoroki moved his body to face them. Bandages? Was he injured? Hagakure shook her head. I don't think so, I didn't see blood or anything on them, and he didn't walk like he was hurt. She shrugged, her uniform wrinkled to prove her action did happen. Being invisible really was a struggle sometimes. Midoriya was the next to start butting in. Bandages but no visible injuries? It could be part of his quirk, but what kind of quirk requires the user to have bandages on all the time? Hey, where was he wearing them? He paused his mumbling to ask. It was around his neck and arms. I think he had them on his chest too, since the fabric of his shirt was kinda pushing out like there was something under. All Might's #1 fanboy resumed his mumbling, this time accompanied by writing in his notebook. He was lucky that Bakugo was sleeping in the back of the room, otherwise he'd be yelling right now. Ugh, enough of the quirk talk and being all weird. Did you talk to him? What was he doing? Mina cut off that part of the conversation to bring it back to her original point, gossip. He was talking to present Mike, well, more like standing there while being rambled at, she huffed. I didn't get to hear much since they had finished talking once I got closer to listen. Uraraka laughed quietly. He is super loud. I wonder how Professor Aizawa handles it. He does like silence way more than noisy things. Ioma giggled. Because they're in love. Cue the deadpan stares from the class. No one wanted to think of their teachers kissing or doing other stuff. But I did talk to him. It was so cool. Geez, I almost forgot the most important part of the story. Listen to this, Midoriya. I think you'll be super interested in this. She clapped her hands before talking again. All right, listen up guys. He saw me. Not literally, but once Mike left, he turned to where I was hiding and waved. I almost had a heart attack. So I went over to him and he said that my quirk was cool and if I could turn off the invisibility. Obviously, I said thank you because whoa, a hot guy complimenting me. And told him I'm always invisible. Here's the juicy part. He poked my cheek and boom, I was visible. It was so weird. It felt like a tingly sensation and kinda tasted like apples, which was kinda strange, but I was visible. From a touch. Midoriya was writing so fast his hand might just fall off. Momo, who was trying to study, gasped quietly. He disabled your quirk? But not even Professor Aizawa can do that since you have a mutation power, so you just became visible just like that? Hagakure nodded, not that anyone could tell. There was like a blue light that spread over me first, but yeah, just a touch. Momo nodded. Did he explain anything? This was really something new. No one had ever seen a quirk that could disable mutations. Not even their own teacher whose entire quirk was based on erasure. Nullification quirks don't just grow on treats, especially one that powerful. No, he didn't. He just said that as long as he was touching me, I would be visible. And he called me pretty. I really was gonna melt. He saw me blushing. That's so embarrassing. Mina laughed and patted her friend's back. I'm jealous. You got a guy to call you pretty and touch your face and talk to you? Miss Thing, you're living the dream. The two girls giggled. I wonder who he is though. He appeared out of nowhere and it's weird that the school would let random people in after all the attacks from the league. So he has to be important, right? The others nodded in agreement with Mina's words. We should ask our teacher instead of snooping into others' business. Ida finally decided to scold them instead of peeping in. Weren't you just spying on our convo? Mr. Class President. Mina teased. Ida stuttered for a comeback but couldn't think of anything, so he just sat back down onto his seat and kept quiet. The bell rang signifying they needed to head to their next class, Hero Studies with All Might. The group shuffled in, mumbles of the new gossip floated around them. After taking their seats, All Might waved at the class. Hello class. We'll just be doing some talking today, no fieldwork? The class groaned at this information. We will have training tomorrow though. So keep your spirits up high. He grinned widely and gave the class a thumbs up. Principal Nizu has instructed me to talk to you guys about a new change that will start tomorrow. Myself and Aizawa will be accompanied by a new teacher from now on. You guys might have seen him around, but you'll meet him properly tomorrow. He's a new hire, so be nice to him and don't overwhelm him. I think it's his first time teaching a whole class, not one-on-one. Mina was holding back a loud yell of joy that she would get to meet this mystery man. Sir? Does that mean he was a private teacher? But then why did he switch to big classes? How many people has he taught? What's his quirk, because from what I know now it seems really powerful, and have you met him yet? Why are new teachers getting hired if the league is becoming a bigger threat? Midoriya shot a list of questions at the number 1 hero. All Might laughed awkwardly. Now, young Midoriya, I can't talk of a fellow teacher's personal business, so you can ask him yourself tomorrow, but I can say that he was hired after a long interview with Nizu, and I have briefly spoken to him at our most recent staff meeting. With Midoriya's questions answered, for the time being, All Might carried on with his lesson plan of the day. While this was all going on, Dazai was slacking off in the staff room. He had entertained himself with his exploration of the school and sitting in during lectures, but now he was over it. The classes were all basic and simple. There were no active lessons today, so he had to listen to blah blah heroes good blah blah gur villains bad fight them. For who even knows how long? He had his body draped across a very soft couch as he played games on his phone. He had received a text from the league before he arrived at the school, but he didn't have time to respond without looking weird to the eyes of the others. But since he was officially bored of the classes but had sat through enough of them to appear that he was interested, he was free to scheme. Unknown number, Dazai Osamu. You must know who this is already, so I do not feel the need to introduce myself. When can we meet? Dazai Osamu, Yua? Nice to meet you, sir. I'm free after since I'm a teacher now. No more bar jobs for me. Sad face, just some part-time shifts teehee. Unknown number, a teacher? You don't strike me as the type to enjoy the company of children. We will meet in 2 days' time at. Be there at on the Dazai Osamu. On not the type? Does that mean I look super scary? Gore. Unknown number, you are far too sinister to be trusted to educate the youth of future heroes. Whoever hired you must be a fool to not see your true colors. Dazai Osamu, understood? What do you mean? I'm an angel. I don't think the little rat principal would like you calling him a fool. Ring equaled understood. Unknown number, you're in contact with him? Why is that? Have you managed to weasel your way into a job position at UA? Dazai Osamu, oh, it was surprisingly easy. Doesn't he have an intelligence quirk? Unknown number, he does. You managed to outsmart him. Dazai Osamu, you are a powerful ally to have. Dazai Osamu, asterisk, geeks. I've been told I'm a pleasure to have around. Dazai Osamu. I'll see you in 2 days. I do hope we get along. Bye. The next day was going to be an exciting one, Dazai's first day at work. He would surely become the best teacher and loved by all. At least that was his goal. He just needed to come off as charismatic to his fellow teachers and mostly the students. If the kids liked him, they would be more likely to fall for his manipulations and defend him if his coworkers were suspicious of him. He was a likable guy when he bothered to put on a mask, so he wasn't worried in the slightest. He did need to outdo Aizawa since the man got a hint of his bloodlust on their very first meeting. It was clear the older man was going to be put off by him and trying to find out what his true goal was. Sadly for him, Dazai didn't have a real goal. He was going to play for both teams for a bit, leaning towards the villains, before he made his final choice. He was also busy with doing searches on how he ended up in this world. If there was a way back to his own timeline, would he take it? He wasn't quite sure yet. He did miss some things, very tiny details like the smell of the river he always tried to drown himself in, or just hearing Kunikida scold him. It was so strange to him that a detective facility never thought, oh hey, maybe our coworker is depressed or has heavy mental issues. Instead it became a joke to them, which Dazai didn't mind. Better to be thought of as a joke than to have them trying to help someone who is far past saving. He could handle himself, he had for this long. He spent nights staring at his ceiling, letting go of his masks to lay motionless for hours. Having a constant personality was so much work. He had spent his whole life carefully crafting his persona to go along with his name. His mafia days were simpler. He didn't have to be emotional. He only needed to keep up his banter with Chuya, and his conversations with Oda and Engo came easy for him. Friendship was overrated anyway. Dazai lifted himself from his light sleep to prepare for his first day. He was planning to get there earlier to speak with his brand new bestie. He wondered if Aizawa would be openly cold to him in front of the students or act indifferent. He was especially excited to see All Might again. The man may be the #1 hero, but he was severely lacking brain cells. Dazai had even made slight villain-like comments on how the man must have a weakness that could be exploited with his ability. His assumption on that was confirmed when All Might made it a mission to not touch Dazai. What an odd guy. How did this guy act in his daily life? A whole mess. Bandage-wrapped hands went to button up his shirt's collar. He wore his AD outfit but kept the bandages on his eye and cheek, for a bit of pizzazz, you know? He was going to take the subway, but he wasn't in the mood for more social interaction than needed, so he hopped on his bike and drove. He arrived in a short amount of time since he may or may not have broken a few laws on speeding. Dazai parked, then headed inside with a happy skip to his step. His footsteps echoed with the small click of the heel of his shoes as he walked through the hall towards his class. No one would be here yet, which was excellent. Well, a few teachers' pets might get to school early. He would never understand the point. If anything, it's annoying to the teacher to come in early. It takes away from alone/preparation time, and frankly, who the hell wants to awkwardly sit in a room with their students so early in the morning? Not him. Dazai pushed the large door of the classroom open and entered. Wow. This was so underwhelming. It just looked like a normal class with big doors. Boo? Even Kunikita's perfectly neat desk was cooler. Dazai walked up to the front desk and peeked behind it. Was this guy asleep? Seriously, what kind of school was this? Hello. Dazai cupped his mouth to make his voice extra loud next to the other man's ear. Aizawa opened his eyes slowly and greeted Dazai with a cold, hard stare filled to the brim of pure annoyance. You know, you should sleep at night and not during class. Isn't that the student's job to slack off? He was really pushing the teacher's buttons now. Aizawa said nothing. He just got out of his horrendously colored sleeping bag and stood up. Rise and shine. I hope we get along. Dazai bowed. It would have just been seen as a form of respect to onlookers, but they both knew it was a mockery of Aizawa's authority. The younger man smiled, a soft and innocent one. If Aizawa didn't know better, he'd think this man was similar to his students. Young and full of potential. Dazai was young and painted in darkness. He didn't look older than 25. He was obviously an attractive man in his early 20s, but somehow radiated the energy of a demonic being. Hello, Dazai. The name even felt wrong to say. It felt like tar or rat poison was being spread on his mouth just from speaking the word. Aizawa's heavy stare bore into Dazai, but the newest addition to the school just kept the sweet and innocent smile plastered on. Hiya. We have very similar quirks, isn't that so cool? Yua, you're definitely my favorite hero. The coolest. Dazai's eyes were practically sparkling as he spoke. Aizawa was instantly reminded of his interactions with Shigaraki. The same childish look in the eyes, wide grin while offering him praise based on his quirk. Horrifying. Aizawa was about to respond. Dazai had started to give him the same feeling of fear that he got from a villain. The underground hero shivered. The childlike wonder had disappeared and was now replaced with an emotionless smile. Dazai raised a hand and patted Aizawa's head like you would a dog, then turned to stand at the chalkboard and began to write. Aizawa couldn't even process what had just happened. He had never seen any villain act like this. Ever. All of them had been loyal to a singular act. Shigaraki always acted like an overgrown child and seemed to view everything as a video game. Dabi always acted carefree and violent. Toga always acted like a crazy, bloodthirsty teenage girl with a high school crush. It was constant. Never had he seen such a way of acting. He figured either Dazai was a very dangerous man or he was mentally ill/unstable. The large number of bandages that were wrapped around Dazai's body supported his second theory. Aizawa did have a soft spot for helping others with a troubling life, but he couldn't shake off the fact Dazai was a threat to the school. He was able to reek of bloodlust, and the way he acted just now. Aizawa really needed to be careful. Before either of the men could speak to each other, the class started to pour in. Ida was the first to walk in. He greeted both of them and sat down. Dazai could almost smell the kid's curiosity of thinking about who this new person was in the class. Dazai spun around in his spinny chair behind the desk and hummed the tune to his most favorite song, the iconic Suicide Song. He tuned out the sound of the other students entering and talking amongst themselves. He was aware they were most likely staring at him and asking each other what they knew concerning this guy. Dazai assumed that the teachers had at least given the students a rundown on what was going on, but who knows, this whole school was weird on how they operated. He only stopped spinning around when Aizawa asked why he was playing around like some dumb kid, and tripped the chair over. Oof. He landed on his stomach and just laid there. For a good minute. Sensei? Is he okay? No response from either of the adults until Dazai snickered and sat up. He looked to the kid who asked and winked in a friendly manner while standing. All Might's successor? His hair is ugly. Dazai walked to where he had already written his name and ability's name on the board. Good morning. My name is Dazai Osamu. It's a pleasure. He put back up his act of a nice guy who just wanted to help the future generations when he talked. A chorus of good morning, sir, went around the room. You guys are already tame, unlike my old students. Dazai clapped his hands together. I'll be your new assistant teacher. Oh, you guys can ask me questions if you want. Say your name and quirk first. I'll answer all of them, no limits. A vast number of students raised their hands. Geez, was he really that popular? Dazai pointed at little All Might. Hello. I'm Izuku Midoriya and my quirk is called Superpower. It's pretty much a power-up quirk. He rubbed the back of his head nervously. What's your quirk and how does it work? Since you have those bandages everywhere, so I'd assume they are connected to how your quirk works as maybe a support item or dash. Shut up, Deku. It's too fucking early, and with that yell from Bakugo, Deku stopped rambling. My quirk is called No Longer Human. It allows me to remove a person's quirk as long as I'm touching them. It works on those with mutation-type quirks too. It'll just make the person resemble a normal-looking human. Get it? Midoriya nodded while writing it down. Dazai skipped over the question of his bandages and went to choose someone else to talk. You with the red and white hair? My name is Shoto Todoroki. My quirk is called Half Cold Half Hot. It's self-explanatory. My question is, who are your previous students and their quirks? You said we were tamer. What does that imply? A smart one? Dazai would have to be extra good around that kid. His comment implied numerous things, but the main one was that the hero students were becoming tamed mutts who don't think for themselves. I was a private teacher. I only taught 2 kids though, one for maybe 4-ish years and the other for about a year or 2. The first kid was a mess to work with. He still is, even though I'm not his mentor anymore. He was extremely violent and quick to turn to hurt people before talking or thinking of what to do after. His quirk was the ability to manipulate cloth. He used his coat with it. It's a very versatile power. He could make tentacles to walk with, wrap it around things. It had a beast called Rashomon that could eat anything in its path, which is its main form. A very, very powerful ability, but he refused to believe it could be used for anything other than violence. My second student had a mutation quirk that he could go back and forth from. He was able to turn into a large white tiger that has regeneration abilities and is bulletproof. He could get his leg ripped off as a human, but with his form switched, it grows back. He could also transform only some parts of him, usually arms or legs, to use the tiger's strength and speed while being human. He was definitely easier to teach, a good listener, and sweet too, but he was riddled with a lot of trauma that made him doubt his capabilities, which made it hard for him to make progress. Todoroki nodded. Why do you keep using past tense for them? Dazai sighed softly. They died, he whispered, just loud enough for them to hear. They were technically dead in this world, so it wasn't really a lie, now was it? The class looked uncomfortable at his words. Even the stone-cold student did too. I'm sorry for your loss. They were like your sons, weren't they? Dazai gasped at the new voice, Uraraka. She had a gravity quirk, kinda like Chuya. I guess, if I'm the dad, then my dear little Hattrack would have been the mom. He would have hated to hear that one. Dazai laughed at his own joke. He made it obvious that this lover of his was also dead. This would mostly prevent any questions involving that part of his life. Perfect. The class did not look like they wanted to talk anymore, so he shrugged. Let's learn now, yeah? No need to feel sad. This is a new start for me. I'm sure they would want me to move on and not dwell on it. And with that, Dazai had ensnared 1A in his trap. In all honesty, it was really embarrassing that those kids ended up being suckers for sob stories. Are all heroes like that, or was it just this class? Dazai let Aizawa explain to the class that the newbie teacher was to decide what to do today. The kids probably wanted to fight. Too bad. Dazai stood up and cheekily waved. I'm guessing you guys want to fight and use your quirks? The class, of course, agreed with his statement. What? Sorry. No combat from me today. I have something interesting though. Promise. Wow, by judging their facial expressions, these idiots really were desperate to punch stuff. Don't look so upset. We'll get into fighting once this unit is done. It won't take long. Saying that seemed to cheer them up though Aizawa was still giving Dazai a death stare. Alright, I'm going to ask you guys questions and give scenarios for you to answer, K? Just raise your hand to respond and don't be afraid to disagree with each other and bring up why you think they're wrong. Dazai clapped his hands together. The first scenario, he began with a cheery voice before switching to his trademark emotionless and authoritative voice that he used in the Mafia. You break into a well-known villain's base and get caught off guard and get captured. You struggle to get loose, and once you figure out a plan to escape, the villain walks in before you enact it. The villain berates other heroes and the hero society in general, then starts to try and convince you to join them. Their points are rather good and are convincing. Do you keep listening to them or tune them out and wait to plan your next move? Dazai's eyes had also gone dull to fit his Mafia persona. The class had looked taken aback by the switch in his personality and what he asked. They hadn't ever actually been told of this kind of stuff. It was just assumed they would never switch sides. Plus, any heroes who did switch ended up being lied about by saying they were an undercover agent the whole time. Dazai silently waited for someone to answer. He had his hands behind his back as he stood with perfect posture in the center of the room. He could see Aizawa out of the corner of his eye. The man appeared to be thinking over the scenario too. How interesting. Did all heroes just think no one would switch sides? Was that just how things worked here? How idiotic. They were definitely more prone to betrayal with that mentality, but knowing how this world was, the villains most likely didn't use that strategy often. They were also affected by the assumption that heroes had a fixed view. Dazai mentally marked this to tell the League when they meet up. Both groups were dumb in similar ways. Would it kill them to use mind games over violence? Mind games work better, or maybe Dazai is just biased since beating people up is Chuya's thing. After a few more silent seconds, Momo raised her hand. That was a surprise. Dazai figured that it would have been either Midoriya or Ida who would start talking first. He nodded at her and urged her to speak. Well, sir, I believe a hero should stay silent and ignore the villain. While the villain is monologuing, the hero has the chance to think of a new plan and set it in action. The hero could also take them off guard by attracting while the villain is still talking. Dazai nodded. This was the basic answer he was expecting. He didn't think any of them would choose to listen, but if they did, it would properly be with a hero would never turn to the side of evil or something like that. Does anyone want to add or disagree? He asked them. No one moved until Uraraka started to talk. Well, if the hero listens, they could use it to their advantage. Dazai stared at her. Where was she going with this? If it was going towards the direction of Dazai's own opinion on the question, well, that would mean Uraraka isn't a hero in the way this society defined them as. Go on, what do you mean by that? She had a look of nervousness before explaining herself. Well, you could trick the villain that you're joining them and attack when they let their guard down. Not exactly what Dazai thought, but pretty good. She looked like she wanted to say more but was too nervous over her answer, so Dazai began to give his answer. Good, I'll tell you what I would do in this situation. He shot a sly smile towards Aizawa before talking. I would listen to them and, like Uraraka, use it to my advantage. I would either lie and join their side or use their beliefs against them by mocking them. Hitting their sensitive spots that are based on how they think will make them upset, which leads to irrational actions that I can use in order to capture them. They might try to hit me while I'm immobilized, but I can find a way to use their blows to loosen myself, or they would rant and give me time to escape, or if I had any, my backup could arrive. Dazai nodded at his own explanation. Next example. What do you do if someone you're close to or know well enough turns to the side of villains? Dazai smiled at the class. He already knew who he would choose as most likely to switch teams and was definitely going to say it. It would be fun to stir that up. Once again, the class was quiet while they thought over the question. Dazai swayed back and forth on his feet as he waited. He was still watching Aizawa just to check for any reactions that could clue into anything that would be useful to push his buttons. Oh. Sir, I believe not a single person I know could become a villain. We're all in the hero course for a reason. Because we are destined to work and hard and become heroes to stop villains. Ida, so naive, disappointed. Ida? Right? Dazai sighed, that's just purely incorrect. The blue-haired teen gaped, wrong? How? Anyone has the ability to become evil. Everyone in this room could change sides. Just because you are in this course and training to be a hero, does not mean you don't have the ability to turn sides. Either by being convinced or swayed by the villain's reasoning, being betrayed by the heroes you love, a traumatic moment, being pushed over the edge and snapping, your views could change, your mindset could twist. No one is purely good or purely evil. That's just how humans are. Ida stuttered before answering. People who are swayed so easily are not true heroes. No one in this class has the traits of a villain. No one would betray heroes or friends. The rest of the class shouted agreements. Dazai groaned inwardly. I can name a few people in this room who are most likely to turn into villains. He was given looks of doubt and disbelief, expected from such foolish kids. Don't believe me? That's fine. I'll tell you who has the most potential to turn. A few of them looked towards Bakugo, expecting the explosive blonde's name to be said. Izuku Midoriya has the highest chance to become a villain. The boy in question stood up and began to do a mix of defending himself and asking why. His friends also joined in with denying it and claiming he would be least likely. If anything, Bakugo would be a better choice. This came from Todoroki, really? I said he's one of the least likely. Dazai giggled at the looks on their faces. Even Bakugo looked surprised that Dazai didn't think he could be a villain. Bakugo is compared to villains often. Even the league believed he would switch, but I think that because everyone keeps telling him this, it's more of a reason for his mind to be grounded on being a pro-hero. I don't even know him too well, but I already can tell he's stubborn and will always try to prove people wrong. He would never let other people's words affect his goal and will not become a villain to prove how he's better than everyone else by staying loyal and not falling to the assumptions of his peers. Bakugo stayed silent. His ears were turning red in embarrassment from being spoken of in a positive light. Now, Midoriya is a different story. He's a good student and has talent, but even with all the praise he gets, he's most likely. The kid was bullied since a kid and was doubted of being able to be a hero for a long time. It's possible he could simply snap one day and want to take revenge on people who put him down. Also, the kid is kind of a pushover. He could eventually become violent from how he's been treated by others. Yes, he has friends now, but talking to new people can't just erase how he grew up. Get it? Everyone has the ability, no matter what you think. Take a look at yourselves. What would send you over the edge? What doubts have you ever had in heroes and in yourself? Dazai waved his hand in a dismissive manner. I'm not trying to scare you though, just opening your mind to other possibilities. It would be very interesting if All Might's successor switched sides. Doesn't he have a whole book filled with the hero's quirks and weak points? If the league got their hands on that, oh my, the heroes would be in for a huge surprise. Does the school even know about the journal? If they do, they're idiots for allowing the kid to keep it and carry it around everywhere. Sigh, not even Chiyo would allow that, and he has a soft spot for kids. Does this word just have a bunch of simple-minded idiots in it? Maybe having a quirk causes brain cell loss. Dazai beamed at the class. You guys did well though. It was very enlightening and helped me get to know you guys better. For homework, I want you to write a paragraph or two of your weakness. Not a physical one, a mental one. Keep our conversation in mind while you do. It'll be due next class. Now, I'll see you guys again later in All Might's class. I hope you can all come to like me and my teaching. Dazai put his hands to his heart. Don't be stressed, I believe in you all. Have a good day. The bell rang and the students all shuffled out, quietly discussing his lesson with each other or just walking quietly. Their mind was properly still having trouble seeing how not everything was black and white. Dazai turned to his desk and waved obnoxiously at Aizawa. The man just glared and walked towards him. Oh goodness! Was Mr. Eraserhead angry? Dazai didn't stop the playful grin from spreading across his face at the man's words. These people were so funny. The rest of the day for the students went by awkwardly. They were quiet and not interacting with their friend groups as much as usual. Even their lunch period, which was usually rowdy with talking and laughter, was spent in almost pure silence. Dazai's lesson had opened a door in their minds. Were heroes truly always in the right? Was it wrong to idolize the heroes as much as society did? Were people not born as good or bad? Was it not as simple as that? Who was wrong in all these conflicts, all the fighting and damage done? Was it really just to be purely blamed on the villain, and could they really be called a true villain? The kids sent their pro-hero teachers small looks of doubt and worry. They had grown up with these people being worshipped. Was it really wrong to set them on these godly-level pedestals? The student who was hit the most was, of course, Midoriya. He was practically trademarked as the biggest hero fan in the school. He spent his lunchtime staring at his notebook, not touching his food at all. Uraraka and Ida kept frowning at staring at their friend while Todoroki ate his food quietly. He didn't seem bothered by what Dazai had said. After all, his father is Endeavor. All Might's class with Dazai was next and everyone was anxious to enter the room. Dazai was waiting happily. His interaction with Aizawa really lifted his mood. The man was so interesting. He obviously cared for his students but tried to hide it. It was a very sad attempt though. It was way out there that he was basically their dad at this point. He had gotten a rant about blah blah you can't say those things and blah blah it's wrong to put young heroes down. Hypocritical much? Didn't he fake expulsion and tell that broccoli kid he was shit with his quirk or something like that? And a bunch of other crap. Dazai just waved him off and countered with, you can't run a school of heroes by babying them as if they're stupid. They're smart enough to eventually see how the world truly is. I am simply speeding up the process. Is that so wrong? And proceeded to leave. Dazai swung his legs back and forth as he sat on All Might's desk. The large man was running late. Oh well. Seems like a problem for him. Dazai watched with hooded eyes as everyone walked in. His cheery smile quickly vanished to be replaced with his mafia demeanor. Once they were all seated and shifting uncomfortably while trying to avoid his stare, Dazai popped up and waved animatedly. Hello guys. The class sat up to begin listening. Even though they were intimidated, they were all very interested in what Dazai was going to say. All Might is late, not a clue why but it's okay. I assume he'll be here soon. Now, let's go out to the training room. I have some exercises in mind for you all. Dazai was starting to usher them all out but Bakugo yanked on his sleeve and began to talk to him. Yes. Talk not yell. Sir, but what you said before about me, the blonde started, is it true? Do you really think I'm not like a villain? Bakugo's eyes kept shifting to avoid eye contact which earned a sly smile to spread on Dazai's lips. Was he really that scary? Even Atsushi could stare him down if he wanted. Nichim, I 100% believe you have the least chance of switching sides or being tempted. As I said, you're stubborn, loud, and never back down from a challenge. I doubt you could ever be swayed. Dazai patted the explosive teen's head softly. Bakugo nodded. All right, sir? Yes? Bakugo awkwardly muttered, thank you, before rushing off to join his class. Dazai let himself laugh loudly this time. What weird people. That kid was definitely going through some shit. Being aggressive constantly would definitely be something that his society would classify as evil. Dazai would bet 10 cans of crab that these people didn't take mental health seriously either. It fits their agenda of what he's seen so far. Someone needs to get these kids a therapist and that's coming from Dazai. With a cheery hop in his step, Dazai stepped out to catch up to the class. Hey, from what I've seen, you guys focus on mastering your quirks, right? The students nodded in confirmation. And what about training with no quirks or just with weapons? For example, fighting with a staff or knife. Silence. No? We'll have to work on that. Dazai stood in front of them. My quirk is not fit for combat. At all. Unless I'm close to my opponent, my quirk is useless. They didn't need to know of his new ideas of using his ability from a distance. Who knows what he was capable of? They certainly did not and he would like to keep it that way. So, I train using guns and other handheld weapons. Even simple hand-to-hand helps. Dazai pouted playfully at the looks of confusion he got. Did they really not get it? Gosh. Think of it like this, Aizawa's quirk. He can erase your power from far away. If you don't have your quirk and have no other weapons on you, how are you going to fight back? All he would have to do is knock your lights out with his own combat experience / weapons and you're out. Also, the League, what if they got some sort of gas that can numb quirks? Spray it on you guys and you're all dead. A touch from their leader can kill you, and I'm certain all their subordinates could wear down a bunch of inexperienced teens. A little clue to some future events. Dazai was already experimenting, but when he meets up with his new friends, well, the heroes will need these tidbits from Dazai. From what he could see, the villains want to kill the symbol of peace to bring light on how society is weak for solely relying on a single man with a powerful quirk to protect them. Good thought process, but their planning is terrible. Luckily for them, Dazai is an excellent strategist. Of course, he would have to see each member's fighting style and study their personalities before making a perfect plan, as well as doing the same for the UA students. Dazai had a feeling that Class A would somehow always get involved, so he should keep their power levels in mind while he plots. The ADA would be disappointed in him. He had come so far, but he was not human. An inhumane creature doesn't need to live by anyone's expectations. He can do whatever he wants, there's no one to stop him. Absolutely no one, Oda. No one can change him, Oda tried. He was always meant to stay in the dark. Oda believed in him. He could be good. He could fight in the light. He could. Dazai didn't care about humans, but Oda, his first friend. Dazai needed no one. Oda would be disappointed in him. You can't think that having a quirk automatically means you'll be a strong fighter. Yes, a quirk is helpful, but you can't rely on it. Dazai nodded to himself. I know people who don't even have a quirk that could take down this class by themselves with just their weapon of choice. I know quirk users that fight without their power and are just as powerful. It's about the person, not their quirk. A powerful quirk is useless if you don't know how to fight without it. Yes, it's important to master control of it, but you can't have all your focus on that. Miss Yajiruzo, you can create objects, right? That quirk is perfect for what I want you guys to do. Can you create these? Dazai pulled out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to her. Any questions? Dazai sighed. He swayed back and forth on his heels as he waited to see if anyone had anything to say. Nothing. Well, since no one wants to talk, he smiled warmly. I will. Dazai clapped his hands to gather everyone's attention. Ahem, I've seen a lot of children and adults with powerful quirks mocking those without them or people with weaker quirks, and really, it's very odd. Those without quirks can be just as powerful or even more powerful than people with good quirks. Personally, I think humans that are quirkless haven't tried to get strong since they're so used to being treated as weak that they truly believe it is a fact and they can never be strong. Dazai placed his arms behind his head. The class looked doubtful at what he said, and he didn't exactly blame them. It was how they were raised. I get that it seems impossible for someone who's normal to beat you guys up. Yes, he did say normal. These kids are all weird as hell. But it can happen, and that's why you need to learn self-defense without powers. Got it? A quirkless villain could take you out just as fast or faster than a powerfully quirked one. There's definitely technology that can work against you. Guns, knives, bombs. All these fun toys can really kill or mess someone up. Dazai's eyes darkened as he thought of those weapons. Chia really had a thing for knives. It was always his first choice, unlike Dazai who used guns. Anyway, Momo, did you finish? He asked. She nodded and handed him a box filled with whatever it was he asked for. Dazai reached in and grabbed a loaded pistol. See this? He waved it around and aimed at the wall next to Ida's head. Watch. The bullet shot forward and buried itself into the target area. Ida flinched, his mouth wide open in shock as he turned around to look at the smoking hole. WTFs? Sir, that is dash, Dazai cut him off. Part of my lesson. You didn't dodge or even acknowledge where I was aiming, even though it was pretty obvious. He shrugged and spun the gun on his fingers. I'll be teaching you guys to use either a gun or another weapon of your choice. I'm pretty versatile on what I can use. The class slowly nodded. Their eyes were trained on keeping track of the hand Dazai held the gun with. Dazai puffed his cheeks out and reached into his coat pocket to pull out a small knife. He threw it onto the ground. The small object rattled as it slid across the floor. I could have killed one of you with that since you were all focused on the gun and not my other hand. You have to have a wide range, not a single focal point. Learning more than just basic fighting skills is very useful. That's why I'll be teaching you that as well as improving your observation skills. Dazai pointed at the knife laying on the ground. An opponent will always have more than one strategy and definitely more than one weapon. Now, what are you to do if you battle against someone whose quirk you don't know or have very few hints as to what it may be? He asked. The class thought it over for a bit before Todoroki raised his hand. Dazai nodded and allowed him to speak. Well, I suppose we should find clues based on their fighting style to fit it into what people with similar quirks use, like, people whose quirks work better from a distance would keep as much space as possible between themselves and the hero, or if someone needs to use their hands to activate the quirk, they would try to get close to grab the hero. That was actually a good answer. I had expected something like, trust the other heroes to find out the quirk and inform you ASAP, which could happen, but you shouldn't put all your trust in that. Your answer is smart, but someone could easily change their fighting style so when they do use their quirk, it comes as a surprise, or, since heroes are so famous and well known, anyone can get information on a hero's quirk and how it works. For example, our lovely Aizawa needs to keep his eyes open for his quirk to stay on. What if someone just throws sand into his face? Blindfold him? Poke his eyes out? Rip them out with their hands? Blinding him to put him out of the game permanently. Not only will this help themselves, but their peers will be thankful and give them respect, which of course, gets them more allies. Dazai grinned darkly, his mafia persona showing as his mind began to fill with more gruesome ways to stop heroes from using their powers. Doesn't Todoroki get frostbite from his ice side if used for too long? He isn't immune to the cold, and even if his flames can warm him up, it can only last for so long. Shoving him in a freezer can do the trick. Or the easy way, rip off his arms since he seems to only access his quirk by using his hands. Hagakure is rather simple. Assuming her insides are not invisible, making her bleed can ruin her stealth. Even just dumping paint on her can do the job. Uraraka, cut off her fingers. One by one, maybe even film it since the class is sensitive. Torture is a very strong weapon to use on this class, but not torture for information. Nope. Just making one of them suffer, make one scream and cry. Push one to the breaking point, drive one half insane, and then show the others. These heroes either act on strong emotion or will only act if the mission can give them a reward. Fame, money, as long as there is something to gain. Class 1A is a sure way to get recognized. After all, they are the future of hero society. They're all so easy to toy with. How embarrassing. Without the use of his eyes, he is a normal human. He does not have super strength or flight, which are powers that cannot be removed so easily. He does not have a secret hidden quirk. He cannot take anyone by surprise in this state. He is nothing without his quirk, as are most heroes. Now, if he learned fighting skills and had other weapons, it is a different story. His capture scarf is a good example of proving he knows his quirk cannot be his only tool. Paired with his quirk, it becomes even more dangerous to opponents, but even if used alone, it still can be used as a useful device in fights. Of course, if he cannot see anymore, it is hard to use that scarf. This is why it is also good to not only develop your body with muscles to become stronger, but also train your other senses. I'm sure you all know the 5 senses, right? Dazai asked this question with a mix of the voice used to talk to a small child and a bit of his harsh, mocking tone he used with Akutagawa when asking trivial things that are common knowledge. The class gave him mummers of, yes sir, yeah, and Jesus, we aren't fucking kids. Dazai continued. If a hero can improve those small things, it will be a huge game changer. Now, if Aizawa has maxed out those skills, he could still fight. Focusing his hearing on identifying footsteps, being able to pinpoint the enemy's location by listening to their feet, breathing, and maybe even sounds of their quirk being activated can make any attempts of combat/escape more likely to succeed even without his eyes. Smell can help him get a sense of the basics of his location. Since, well, being held at a warehouse and being held in some sort of vehicle don't exactly smell the same. The same goes with touch. Of course, there is a chance the villains took all of this into account. Then what? If you're blinded, unable to use your quirk, and have not a clue as to where you are, what do you do? Bakugo quickly put his hand in the air. Interesting, that kid doesn't usually practice normal class rules. He would be more likely just to yell his answer. After being called on, the blonde spoke, hidden weapons. And not basic-ass hiding spots like in shoes or like tucked in your pants. Maybe something in your mouth? Or some other place that is weird to hide shit. Dazai nodded happily. He gave Bakugo a big thumbs up. Good. That was perfect. There are many places to hide things on a human and then the places that are not as well known to use. For example, I could hide a knife by strapping it on my chest and when I need it, I can just reach up into my shirt. Tada. Knife. I'm sure you guys have seen Toga Himiko pull knives out of nowhere. She usually keeps them on her legs or tucked into her sweater sleeves. Very smart and easy to access during a fight. More sneaky ways to keep things hidden. People who identify/present as female have more spots than those who identify as male or those who do not classify as any gender to hide things. It's not as likely that someone will strip a female to check every single spot to look for weapons either out of respect or because society likes to portray women as weak, which can make a person think, I doubt she would even think of that, or flat out being uncomfortable with putting their hands on an unconscious female. Now, the League has female identifying villains, so if they wish to fully search a female hero, one of the other girls would do it. A girl can hide things under her skirt, inside her shirt, even going as far as a extra inside, which can double with males. Yeah, I understand if you think I don't want to do that, or gross, is he a perv or something, but it is a valid hiding spot and as far as I know, always works. Because really, do you seriously want to check inside someone's lower regions for a weapon? Most people would not. Dazai snickered to himself, he really should have made Chia do that and pass it off as an order from Mori. That would have been such good blackmail. Also, like Bakugo mentioned, inside your mouth. I've seen people tuck poison capsules in their teeth which they use if they are captured to kill themselves before being forced to give out information. Some of the students gave their teacher looks of curiosity and some suspicion. Well, only Todoroki was staring like he was going to come up with a new conspiracy theory, but the others were wondering when he had ever witnessed this happening. Don't worry though. Suicide capsules are not the only thing you can hide. You can tuck a small but high-powered bomb in your mouth, but that is a risky action since they can be activated if moved around too much. Though, if you really are at that point, give up. You are not fit to be a hero if you end up in such a dangerous and complicated situation with no way out. Dazai laughed softly. Don't look so scared, okay? I'm here to help you guys be able to overcome any of the things that could get thrown your way in the world of being a hero. Dazai gave the class one of the sweet smiles that he used when Atsushi was doubting himself. You can all become great heroes. It might seem like a lot of work, and it is, but myself and the other teachers are here to guide you to your goals. 1A looked a bit fearful before, but Dazai is a great actor, so with a small smile and some kind words, they relaxed and felt confident that Dazai was a good person and is already proving himself to be an amazing teacher. Dazai looked at his phone and pouted, I'll be back in like 5 minutes. Behave. He walked out and into the hallways to answer whoever had contacted him. The class awkwardly stared at each other before Mina began to snicker. I don't know about you guys, but he's scary in a hot way. Her statement got some giggles and agreements from the other girls. Ida was being oddly quiet. Normally he would have started to go off on how inappropriate it is to talk of teachers like that. Midoriya poked his friend's shoulder. What happened? He questioned. Well, it's nothing major. I've just never met someone who teaches like him. It's a weird approach to use. Midoriya laughed awkwardly. He's like really scary? But also nice? I'm not sure how to describe him. Ida nodded in agreement. Todoroki squeezed himself to sit between those two. Did he have no sense of shame? Geez. I think he's trying to find a teaching style that fits us. He did say that he has only been a private teacher and worked with one student at a time. He's properly trying to combine his old teaching methods and add other things that will work with us. It's gotta be hard to go from one-on-one teaching to 20 kids. He's doing good though, don't you think? I'm really interested in what he's gonna do next, and he's only done talking this whole time. I've never been more invested in a lecture. Midoriya took out his notebook as he had been talking to add more notes to Dazai's page. Uraraka peered over his shoulder. It seems she got bored of the gossip and went to join them. Oh, Did you guys catch how Aizawa-sensei was giving Mr. Dazai weird looks? She asked before elaborating. Sensei was kinda acting like Mr. Dazai was gonna just go crazy and kill everyone at any second. I wonder why. They haven't talked a lot. I don't think so, at least. Todoroki hummed in thought. I was thinking maybe Dazai was actually a villain, but if he was a villain, why would he tell us so much about what to do if we get kidnapped? It would be bad if he does try to do something to us and we know how to stop him because of his own lessons, and it's really risky for a villain to try anything with all the pros hovering over our class. So, Sensei might just be paranoid. That makes sense. Everyone is on edge right now, so it's totally normal to be suspicious of new people. I hope they can get along though. Imagine how cool it'll be when they do a combined lesson. I can't wait for Mr. Dazai to start actual physical training. I think I want to focus mostly on hand-to-hand combat, but if he does want us to pick a weapon, a knife would be cool. Right? Uraraka's eyes sparkled as she began to daydream of possible lesson plans. Midoriya started to talk again. I bet you would do really well with a knife. He blushed a bit and was about to stutter out another compliment when Todoroki elbowed him in the side. I think I would want to use a gun, but maybe get one that can shoot out ice instead of bullets so I don't need to reload. That's really smart. We should ask if we can make the weapons personalized to fit our quirks. I wonder what Kaken is going to pick. Should I ask? He might need time to think since it's all new and not everyone can really quickly think of a weapon that fits in the nicest way possible. Deku, please stop rambling about Bakugo. Uraraka patted her friend's head after saying this. Todoroki gave a small smile at Midoriya's shocked expression. He looked like a bunny. The playful atmosphere was paused when Dazai walked back in with all might by his side. I found the missing teacher. Now, let us get started. Shall we? If you were to ask Chuya for his opinion on Dazai Osamu, he would scoff and go on a rant about how much he hates his former partner, calling him a lazy bastard, slimy mackerel, waste of bandages, an enemy to all women, and many other insults. He would go on for hours just to complain about the ex-mafioso. Most knew not to ask or even bring up the man's name unless they wanted to spend an hour of their time listening. Overall, it was common knowledge that Chuya despises Dazai. If you were to explore Chuya's mind when asked about Dazai Osamu, it would be a very different story. His thoughts would be filled with questions. Why did Dazai leave the mafia? Why did Dazai abandon him? Was Dazai truly just using him? Did Dazai not care for him? Was he so unimportant to Dazai that he could just be tossed aside like a doll? Why didn't Dazai tell him about his feelings? Dazai's struggles, his pain, his past. Did he not trust Chuya? Was their partnership and trust in each other really all fake and forced? What could have possibly driven Dazai to move into the light? Not only would these questions plague his mind, but they would also keep him awake at night. The thought of Dazai would distract him constantly. Small things would remind Chuya of the bandaged man. A river would remind him of all the times Dazai had jumped in, which forced Chuya to dive after him, resulting in both of them being soaked while fully clothed. Chuya fully refused to use bandages when being treated for wounds that he got on a mission. He claimed it was because he didn't want to look like a walking mummy just like that traitor, but in reality, it hurt his heart to have something on him that was so closely related to Dazai. He had harbored these feelings of the desire to get closer to Dazai for years. He didn't really know. What did he want from Dazai? He wasn't sure for such a long time. The day before Dazai left was the day he realized what he craved from Dazai. He wanted Dazai to have a future. He needed Dazai to live by his side. He wished for Dazai to understand how much Chuya cared for him. He couldn't keep denying his crush on the executive, so he was planning to man up and fess up. They had always flirted with each other, whether it was on a mission or while lounging around. At first, Chuya thought it must have been some sort of ploy or a way to get blackmail, but it all felt so real. The soft touches, intertwining their hands, feeling Dazai run his hands through his hair, it felt so natural. Even kisses, it was nothing serious, just a playful kiss on the cheek after a tiring job or when Chuya had to use corruption. Dazai must have not known that Chuya was conscious after corruption, because that was when Dazai would lovingly pet his hair and kiss his forehead. It was also the only time where Dazai would open up. He didn't say much of his struggles, but the one thing he said that Chuya would never forget was one simple statement. Chuya. I love you. Chuya regretted that he didn't say anything, that he just laid there and pretended to still be unconscious. Maybe if he responded, Dazai wouldn't have left. And now, Dazai left again. Well, he not exactly left more as he disappeared. The ADA had been desperately searching for him, but with no clues or any sign of Dazai for almost a week, they contacted the Port Mafia. Of course, Mori shoved the missing Dazai case onto Chuya. So that was where he was now, walking outside the train station aimlessly trying to figure out where the fuck Dazai could have disappeared to this time. As Chuya was angrily muttering curses under his breath, a young woman tumbled straight into him. Chuya fell backward onto the ground with her looming over him. He stared up at her and it was weird. She simply stared back. Her eyes were pure white and he felt like she was peering into his soul with those unblinking eyes. His mouth was agape. She hadn't even offered to help him up, she just stood over him before laughing quietly. The laugh seemed to snap Chuya back to his senses. What the fuck are you laughing at? He glared at her and stood up. She didn't respond, just kept staring. Just as Chuya was going to shove past her, she reached out and grabbed his face. She used both her hands to squeeze his cheeks before nodding. Chuya growled and was about to activate his ability, but then she spoke. Do you want to find Dazai Osamu? She asked. He buffered for a second before nodding. Did she know something? Or was this some sort of trap? Very well. I'll send you to his location. What the hell does that dash? And everything around him turned black. The last thing he heard before his consciousness slipped away was another voice speaking to that woman. Do you think Dazai Osamu will die? I believe so, but that demon always manages to escape death. When Chuya awoke, he was laying on a park bench. He sat up quickly and looked around. First, he grabbed the bag that was placed next to him that was labeled with his name. He opened it to check what was inside. The bag had been filled with what he would call, "I'm starting a new life after committing a huge-ass crime" kit. Money in cash, a birth certificate plus other legal documents, keys to what was most likely an apartment of some sort, and a change of clothes. Chuya stared at the bag for a good minute in confusion. Why the hell would he need this shit? All the stuff kept his name, no weird code name or anything like that. Just Chuya Nakahara. So what was the point? He zipped the bag shut and got off the bench. If that woman wasn't lying then, Dazai was around here somewhere. Might as well ask around while figuring out where he was. Definitely not in Yokohama, that's for sure. Chuya spent a couple of hours exploring and came to the conclusion of either he's hallucinating, aliens took over the world, or he was in another universe. Of fucking course Dazai had to end up in the universe where girls in spandex were plastered everywhere and all this hero crap. Just Chuya's lucky day. Him, being a well-known mafia executive, which is definitely villain-worthy in this place, trying to find his ex-mafia buddy who would be classified as a bigger villain than Chuya was. This is just amazing. Now, time to find a library to do some research. Dazai's first lecture went well, or at least he thought it went well, while a decent amount of teachers were appalled by his teaching style. Was he really being that harsh, or were these teachers simply being too soft? Once All Might had returned, Dazai sat at the sidelines to watch the class fight. Firstly, he did this to observe their fighting techniques and find flaws. He was a teacher, so he might as well give the students tips. His second reason was simple, to keep an eye out for anyone who would pose a threat to himself/his future plans. So far, Dazai didn't spot anyone who would be a problem to fight against. Honestly, his only true worry was Aizawa. The man may be able to fight, but he is not bulletproof, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue to battle him. The real problem was that Aizawa was smart and very aware of how the world works. Dazai noticed it as soon as he saw the other man. His aura was different. Unlike the other teachers, Aizawa did not appear to be easygoing and playful when it came to his class. Though he did show kindness to the teens, he didn't baby them like the others. A very admirable trait, though Dazai was peeved that the man didn't want any talk of betrayal to reach the students' ears. After all, betrayal is always possible and the students should learn about it. Aizawa would have fit in with the 80. Dazai was sure Kanikita would get along with him. The 80. Dazai had been doing his best to avoid thinking of it, but now his mind was gushing with chatter. He didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to wonder how Atsushi was doing. Was Kyuka adjusting well to her new life? Did Ranpo get any interesting cases? How was Kanikita faring? Someone needed to make sure the blonde didn't get absorbed in his ideals and forget to do common things such as eat and sleep. What about the port mafia? Was Chiya okay? Had he even been aware that Dazai disappeared? Has Akutagawa begun to work with that sushi well? He needed to stop these thoughts. He needed his mind to shut up. He cannot be distracted by things like friendship or emotion. Monsters do not feel. He is not allowed to be loved. Chiya, I am not worthy of your affection. He cannot have friends. Ango, why did you betray me? Monsters only inflict harm on those around. Oda, please forgive me. A demon like him should not be wishing that maybe he could be happy. After all, he had caused so many people immense pain and suffering. Dazai took in a sharp breath, his hands fiddled with the knife in his pocket. Eyes staring forward with a face blank of any emotion, he maneuvered the knife to have the point poking against the palm of his hand. He slowly pushed at the weapon. He sighed when he felt the metal pierce his skin and blood began to spill. He nudged it in deeper, then slammed his hand down roughly on the knife. It went through. Ouch. The knife was sticking out from the other side, blood was flowing, staining his clothing. His mind was quiet. The class ended. Dazai waved goodbye with his left hand. Once all the kids left, he looked to All Might. That man? How odd. Dazai grinned at the hero and stood, both hands now shoved into his pocket. I look forward to teaching with you again. Before the pro could respond, Dazai swiftly left the room. He wasn't needed anymore as he had no classes to attend to, so he went home. Dazai slammed the door shut to his apartment and threw himself onto the couch. He messily removed his coat and tossed it onto the floor. Annoying, he would have to wash it now. Dazai lifted the hand that was still impaled with the knife, held it in front of his face, and huffed quietly. Quickly, he ripped the knife out with his working hand and then stabbed it into his thigh. I'll think of this as a way to repay all the harm I have caused and will be causing in the coming future, he mumbled. He raised the knife up and began to repeatedly thrust it down into his leg. Warm blood was seeping into his couch and coating his leg and arm. The squelching noises of his flesh being torn apart were the only sound that could be heard from him. Dazai wasn't sure how long he had sat there doing this. His hand paused midair and he dropped the knife onto the floor. He quietly watched blood pool around his leg and drip onto the ground. Pain? Was it really the only way he could feel normal? To feel human? Dazai's eyes were dull, he felt empty. His hand hurt, his thigh was aching. He stayed seated. After a while, Dazai drifted off. He wasn't tired, but his head kept drooping down. Maybe he was sleepy? Who knows? At least everything was silent. The blood had stopped dripping and instead was starting to dry up. Quiet, he relished in it. Dazai, huh? Dazai lifted his head, he felt rather woozy, probably from the blood loss. Why was Chiya here? Was he hallucinating? See, Chiya, he whispered. The ginger rushed to his side, he was talking but Dazai couldn't hear him. His ears were ringing. He was crying? Why was he crying? Dazai isn't supposed to cry. So why? He felt Chiya brush away his tears softly and pull him into a hug. Chiya was warm. Who would have thought that hallucinations could be so realistic? See, Chiya? I'm sorry, he managed to say. He felt soft lips against his cheek, then he passed out. He would be okay with dying like this, in Chiya's arms. Really, he was okay with any death if he could die with Chiya in his mind. God, it wasn't supposed to be like this. After wandering around and beating up local villains for information, Chiya had finally found Dazai's location. He just wanted to find that idiot and smack him, not find him like this. What happened? The last time Chiya had ever seen him this way was after a very lengthy mission. A lot of people had been killed at their hands. There was no mercy in the mafia. The two of them were pretty much drenched in blood when they arrived back. Dazai had shooed Chiya away and went to report to Mori. Chiya went back to their shared apartment and thought nothing of it. Well, he had no clue as to what happened during that meeting, but when he finished showering and getting dressed, there was Dazai covered in more blood than before. He was leaning against a wall, a scalpel in his hand as he used it to slice himself open. They stared at each other. Chuya with an expression of shock while Dazai's face was blank. Chuya wanted to ask. He should have pressed for information, but all he did was help Dazai up and quickly wrap his wounds and left. Maybe he should have stayed longer. If he had, would Dazai have told him what went wrong? He had no clue. This time, Chuya would not mess up. He picked Dazai up rather easily. He was too light. God damn it, Osamu. Do you even know how to fucking take care of yourself? Chuya brought the brunette into the bedroom. He laid Dazai on the bed and quickly got to work. Chuya removed his shirt and ripped it apart to wrap around Dazai's leg for the meantime. There had to be bandages around here somewhere. It didn't take long for him to locate the desired item. Chuya started to properly tend to the wounds. A frown was present on his face as he did. It was only when he moved to adjust the pillows under Dazai's head that he noticed the hole in his palm. Shit, what the fuck? Chuya held Dazai's hand, carefully wrapping the bandages around. Chuya pressed a soft kiss onto his hand. Osamu, I won't abandon you. I promise. Chuya sat by Dazai's side. He needed to figure out what to do. After all, their world was freaking the fuck out because of Dazai's absence. Chuya wanted to be selfish. In this universe, there was no port mafia, there was no ADA. It was just them, Dazai and Chuya. Double black. Of course, they would need to return eventually, but would it really be that bad to stay a while? It wasn't unusual for Chuya not to contact anyone during a mission, so it's most likely the Mafia wouldn't worry over him and the ADA would be fine with Dazai gone for a while longer. Chuya patted his former partner's head softly. What would Dazai want? He had done some snooping around and had gathered enough evidence to prove Dazai was meddling with the heroes and villains. Knowing Dazai, he would play with the side that interested him most, the side of the villains. From what Chuya has seen, the heroes were all trashy and superficial while the villains did have some valid points. These points would spike Dazai's curiosity. Dazai always did have a habit to gravitate towards those who possess light in the darkness. Maybe he was like that because he wanted to fill his empty soul with something pure, or is it because he's so accustomed to violence and evil that simple good deeds are outworldly to him? Maybe it's both. Chuya huffed quietly, eyes focused on Dazai's slowly moving chest. What would be the right thing to do? As he began to once again think of all the options he had, Dazai's phone buzzed. The fuck? Chuya groaned and snatched the device. Of course, that idiot had the password set as "dumb bugly hats." Unknown number, the meeting is in 2 hours, you better not be wasting our time. Chuya quickly scrolled through the chat to get some context. Obviously, that idiot can't go, but canceling this meeting would put a dent in Dazai's plotting. Dazai Osamu. Of course not, I'm a wonderful person. Is this how the dumbass typed? What a child. At least it's easy to mimic. Unknown number, don't be late. Dazai Osamu, ooh, I'm always on time and ready to go. Oh BTW, I might send someone to go in my place. I got sidetracked, winky face. Unknown number, that is very unprofessional. Unknown number, I will allow it, only because you will be of use to us. Dazai Osamu, Teeks. Alright, that should work. He pocketed the phone and looked towards Dazai again. Please be okay soon. Chuya was basically playing nurse right now. He changed Dazai's bandages, checked on the wounds, he had even given Dazai stitches to help the healing. Chuya got dressed after he made sure Dazai was stable, then he headed out. Once again, he was a key player in Dazai's stupid games. It only made sense. Chuya didn't bother to present himself well, no need to dress like a law-abiding citizen for where he was going. He borrowed the idiot's bike and set off. As much as Chuya wanted to enjoy riding on a motorcycle, he was stressed. There was a reason why Dazai was the one to do the talking when they were in the Mafia. Chuya sucked at public speaking. Chuya parked the bike nowhere near the meeting point. He didn't trust this league to play nice. They could easily try some sneaky shit by destroying his ride out. Who the hell has an important meeting in a dusty old warehouse that is a 10-minute walking distance from town? Whatever, it's not Chuya's problem if the villains get caught. He could always pull the confused kid card. Being short did have some advantages. The redhead pushed the door open and walked in. His movements were precise, not too fast and not too slow. His expression, lax and cocky, he carried himself as if he was above all others, and he probably was. Chuya stood in the center, hands in his pockets as he waited. They were scolding him to make sure he wasn't late while they weren't even on time? Seriously? Finally, a portal opened in the back of the warehouse. 5 people walked out. The leader, Shigaraki, stepped towards Chuya. The others trailed behind him. What an ugly costume. Must be annoying to put all those hands on. Thank the Lord that the Mafia just wore formal clothing. He would rather drop dead than be forced to wear spandex. Chuya didn't break eye contact with the man. He didn't look very strong, probably only focused on using his quirk rather than combat. Typical. Dazai's notes on him said as much. How the hell did Dazai even get all that information? What a sneaky little bastard. The smartass definitely has more info stored in his mind for later. What's your name? Shigaraki asked. Chuya rolled his eyes. What? No introduction from you guys? Shigaraki growled at him, but before he could speak, he was instantly cut off by the only girl in the group. Hi. I'm Toga Himiko. Hee, nice to meet you. She was bouncing on her feet and waving frantically at Chuya. The redhead raised an eyebrow at her and waved up. The black-haired man next to her huffed in annoyance. My name is Dabi. It looks like Shigaraki really had no control of his group. Ouch. Oh, we're doing introductions now? Hey, I'm Twice, and finally, hello. You may call me Kurojuri. Chuya nodded. I already know of Shigaraki, so no need for you to speak. Toga giggled at that comment. Was this chick on a sugar high or something? Call me Nakahara. What is your relation to Dazai Osamu? Why did he not show up? Shigaraki questioned. His hand had begun to aggressively scratch at his neck. Some kind of nervous tic? Let's just say, we've been a duo for a very long time. Chuya paused. How would he explain Dazai's absence? I'd assume you know that Dazai is currently holding a teaching position at UA. He needed to attend a teacher meeting. Shigaraki didn't respond. Did he run out of questions? Luckily for him, Kurojiri took over. I said, Nakahara, why are the two of you choosing to aid us? Simple, the league's goals have piqued Dazai's interest. Chuya shrugged. It wasn't a lie but also not the full truth. They would get offended if he said Dazai was bored and wanted to fuck with both sides, or something like, my mafia buddy is bored and wants to ruin your world and laugh about it cause he's a brat. Kurojiri stared at him. And your reasoning? Chuya smirked. Smart. He had purposely left out his own motives as a way to test the group's observation skills. Me? I do whatever Dazai says. Dabi scoffed. So like a dirty dog? So hostile. What's his problem? Of course, I'm a loyal mutt, following my master around. As much as Chuya hated that nickname, being referenced to a dog would come in handy. Dazai better not start laughing though. Since he has openly stated that he will listen to no one but Dazai plus that he has no true interest in the side of heroes or villains, the villains have two main options. Either they deal with it and let Dazai decide when Chuya will fight for them or try to win Chuya over and pledge loyalty to their side. Shigaraki would definitely throw a tantrum as soon as Dazai starts playing his little mind games. That asshole had a talent for being annoying and pushing all the right buttons. Though the true leader of the league would want Dazai and Chuya to be on the side of the villains, poor Shigaraki is going to have to cope if he wants praise. I've been told loyalty is one of my many charming traits. Dabi narrowed his eyes. Yeah. He definitely hates those who do exactly as they are told with no input. Kurojiri didn't show any difference in emotion. Very well, we know of Dazai Osamu's quirk, nullification. Correct? Yeah. No quirk can work on him and he can cancel any quirk as long as he's touching the person. Before you ask, my quirk is called for the tainted sorrow. Chuya would never get used to calling his ability a quirk. It's such a weird name, quirk. Really? It even sounds like a disease. And how does this power work? Chuya grinned widely. You want a demonstration? He asked, though he didn't wait for a response before activating his ability. The feeling of for the tainted sorrow spreading through him always pumped him up. He was becoming such an adrenaline junkie. The 5 standing before him all began to glow a light red before slamming onto the ground. Chuya made sure not to put too much force in. It wouldn't be good if he hurt them or accidentally, crush their skulls. To put it in simple terms, it's gravity manipulation. Don't worry, I didn't put any strength into it right now. I'm not trying to break your bones or anything. Chuya nodded to himself and shut off his ability. The league stood up in a daze. Toga resembled a kid on Christmas. Her cheeks were flushed red as she grinned widely, amazed at the immense strength he displayed. Shigaraki seemed rather annoyed, but his eyes gleamed with malice. He must already be thinking of the things he could accomplish with this on his side. Chuya could almost smell the anger radiating off of Dabi. After all, Chuya had just shown insane amounts of power but claimed he had no say in any of his actions, just to serve as a pet to Dazai. How tragic. Dazai would do a better job at figuring Dabi out, but it must be something relating to the power structure in hero society that made him like this. Well, I'm sure you'd love to talk with Dazai soon. You have the number to reach us. Don't be a stranger. With that, Chuya bid them a quick farewell and left. Hopefully, Dazai didn't fall off the bed or something. That would be such a nightmare. The league stood, watching Chuya's retreating form, nothing but silence in the room. Shigaraki turned to the group. It looks like our new player will definitely destroy our opponent. Kurogiri said nothing. He opened a portal and gestured for the group to go in. Once back at their base, Dabi began to speak his thoughts on the new development. Tisich, how do we even know they aren't gonna rat us out? That Dazai guy is working at UA. He dropped down on their couch, arms crossed across his chest with a scowl on his face. Shigaraki huffed. So what? Sensei says those two will be powerful in the game. He removed the hand on his face to stare down at Dabi. Sensei is never wrong. Dabi rolled his eyes. That Nakahara won't even listen to us unless Dazai commands it. Why the fuck does he even listen to him? It's obvious his power is much stronger than just nullification. That was the major thing that irked him. Nakahara was so strong. Why would he allow himself to become a tool/pawn to some bastard? Nullification is a useful quirk, but Dazai could be defeated with brute strength, which no doubt Nakahara is capable of. Was there some kind of ploy behind it? Could Nakahara be planning to take down his owner by going along with this role of dog? Toga giggled loudly. She was bouncing on her heels as she grinned at him. I dunno, it is really weird. I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't let myself be chained down, especially with that kind of power. Dabi grunted in agreement with her. He had enough of that lifestyle when he was still with his father. Do you think he might be trying to kill the guy? Dabi asked. He motioned towards Shigaraki. It would make sense. He gave more info than he had to. He didn't have to explain his quirk or Dazai's, but he did. He practically told us that Dazai can't fight, so Nakahara does all the dirty work. Shigaraki shrugged. I'm not sure. I met Dazai once and he didn't look too lanky but also not strong. Huh. You got to meet him? But Shiggy. Spill the details, I want to know. Toga pouted at him. Yeah boss, tell us. Dabi made sure to put heavy sarcasm on the word boss. It was always a perfect way to poke at Shigaraki. It's not anything exciting. He was working as a bartender and pissed me off, so I went to disintegrate him, but it didn't work. The stupid bastard started to laugh at me. Then he gave me his contact information and said he wanted to join us. Shigaraki's eyebrows furrowed in irritation. I informed Sensei and was told he would be a perfect player. I wonder what he's like. Nakahara was kind of funny, so I hope he's funny too. Hee hee. Toga happily clapped her hands together. We should start planning our meeting with him. Amazingly enough, Dazai had not fallen off the bed. Even better, he was awake. Chuya had quietly opened the door to Dazai's bedroom and saw him sitting up. A wave of stress left his body. Dazai was alive. Now, before Dazai noticed him, he swiftly headed to the kitchen to get the soup he had made earlier. After heating it up, Chuya went into the bedroom. Dazai was startled. His head was still feeling a bit woozy, therefore his senses were not his best right now. It seems he didn't dream of Chuya being here. That means Chuya saw him like that. Shit. Now either he could go back to pretending nothing is wrong while being peppy or actually show one of his weaknesses to Chuya. Dazai was conflicted. He doubted Chuya had a way to get home, but he wasn't sure if Chuya would go along with the new game he's been playing. Did Dazai even want to go home? He wasn't sure. Eventually he would have to. Oda wouldn't want him to stay here, though he was already a failure to Oda's last wish. Plus, he was having fun. The good side was always rather boring to him. Causing trouble has more flavor. Causing chaos here would have no effect on his reputation in his world, so what was the harm? It's not like he cared if this hero-dominated dimension suffered or not. Dazai sighed quietly, his mind was loud again. The door slammed open, Dazai flinched slightly and looked up. "Chia," was all he said. Chia rolled his eyes and sat down next to the brunette. "I brought you food, you better eat it or I'll shove it down your throat." Dazai pouted before dramatically whining, "You're such a brute. Can't you see I'm frail and dainty? So cruel." Chia was almost about to take the bait and start a petty argument but managed to hold back. "Shut up and drink the goddamn soup." Chia got a spoonful and shoved it into Dazai's mouth. Before he could even react, Chia kept shoving more food in his mouth. Eventually, the bowl was empty and Dazai was still pouting. "You forced me to eat such nasty soup, mean?" Chia punched his shoulder lightly. "I'm a fantastic cook, you don't have taste." He set the bowl and spoon aside then faced Dazai. "So, what's the plan?" "HM? The plan? Is the hat-rack going insane? Your ugly hats ate your brain." Dazai played dumb, a loopy grin on his face. Chia growled, he flicked Dazai's forehead. "My brain is fine. Now fess up and fill me in on your game. I'm such a good person that I filled in for your meeting, so this is payment." "You filled in? What happened when you showed up?" Chia gave Dazai a blank look. "But I'll tell you, but are you going to join? I thought you didn't like to be toyed with." All forms of emotion left Dazai's voice. His lifeless eyes peered into Chia's. "Isn't it funny? Double black making a return?" he asked. "I suppose Mori was right. My blood is tainted." Dazai's eyes never left his. "Your blood isn't black, it isn't pure white either. It's red, just like any other human on the earth." Chia's tone left no room for argument. "You're a human and all humans do questionable things." He lightly patted Dazai's head. "I'm playing this game of yours because I want, not because I've been tricked into it. Plus, I trust you. I know you won't put me in danger without telling me you're—" Chia sucked in a deep breath. "You're a very important person to me." Dazai's eyes widened in shock. It was the first time Chia had seen genuine raw emotion on Dazai's face. "Don't argue with me, this is my choice and I'm not going to change my mind." Chia leaned in, his face directly in front of Dazai's. He could feel the other's breaths of air hitting his cheek. His eyes were not blank. But what emotion was in them? Dazai's cheeks were flushed red as he moved a bit closer to Chia. "Chew," he muttered quietly. Chia didn't respond, he just began to run his hand through Dazai's hair, focused on watching Dazai's expressions. Dazai gulped. All he could hear was his raging heartbeat thumping in his chest. He had never felt so warm? He wasn't sure how to explain it, but he bumped his nose against Chia's. He didn't want this feeling to end. He kissed Chia. It felt right. It was right to be close to Chia like this, to be pressed against him. Their lips fit together like a puzzle, slotted perfectly against each other. Neither of them needed to say anything, they just kept kissing. Actions do speak louder than words, don't they? Dazai woke up with hair in his mouth. Something warm? No. Someone warm was laying on top of him. Said someone, was also snoring very loudly. Dazai reached his arm around to hold onto Chia. He placed his injured hand on Chia's head to carefully touch his hair. This was very domestic. Laying here with Chia, it was almost like they weren't both mass murders. As if they weren't the cause of many people having become corpses at their feet and many other small crimes in between. Never would he have even dreamed this would happen, to be in such a soft scene. As much as he wanted to stay like this all day, he had work. Dazai lightly nudged Chia. "Hatrak, wake up. You're super heavy," he whined obnoxiously into Chia's ear. "Shut up, you're so goddamn loud." Chia lifted his head off of Dazai's chest. His hair was sticking up and tangled. "What do you want?" His words were slurred as he was definitely half asleep. Dazai snorted, small gigglings coming from him before turning into full laughs. Chia smacked his arm. "Why the hell are you laughing?" Dazai pointed to the corner of Chia's mouth. "You're drooling." Chia blushed in embarrassment and rubbed the sleeve of his shirt on his mouth. "Zip it. Your hair looks like you got struck by lightning." Dazai patted Chia's head. "Aw, Chia. But your hair is also a mess." Of course, as the kind person he was, Chia smacked his hand away and flicked his forehead. "Dumbass, don't you have work?" Let me change your bandages. He got up and went to grab the supplies needed. Dazai looked down at his body. Chuya had done a good job as a nurse. The bandages were secure and barely budged when he was asleep. Though, Dazai felt uneasy that someone had seen him without his bandages. Even having just one bandage out of place made him feel bare and exposed. It's not that he doesn't trust Chuya, but the flimsy white cloth that wrapped around his body was somewhat like protection for him. Some sort of stability. A constant in his life. The feeling of the scratchy gauze against his skin was somehow soothing to him. The bandages were basically part of him, he always had them on. Even when he sleeps, even when he showers. The only time they are removed is when they are falling apart and can no longer hold themselves up. Dazai didn't like to look at his body, he didn't like to see the large number of scars that are scattered on his skin. More and more scars have been added to his collections as time went on, even in the ADA. Old habits die hard. As much as he says he hates pain, that he wants a completely painless suicide, he craved pain. Saying those things, it was all lies. A lie that no one seemed to pick up on. No one would question the addition of extra bandages or ask about his random disappearances. He didn't need to have others breathing down his neck over it. He was content this way. Pain was such a simple and basic word, but it held a lot of meaning to him. Pain was something everyone feels, therefore if he feels it, he is like everyone else. Not some emotionless demon prodigy or a mafia executive. It's one of the most simple things that a person can feel, whether it's from stubbing your toe or being stabbed. Pain is pain. Therefore, he has no quarrels with being stabbed, shot, punched, kicked, poisoned, thrown. As long as it hurt, he didn't care. Would this be considered an addiction? Maybe. It would be similar to a drug addict, to seek something out that can hurt you and not be able to function without it. He wasn't so selfish that his only reason to suffer is for his own benefit, no. It doubles as punishment. He had killed many, he had hurt many, he had caused such horrible things throughout his time. He should be held accountable. After all, a human wouldn't be able to commit these crimes and feel nothing towards it. They would feel guilty and end up being punished by the law. His payment for all he has done and will continue to do is simple. He must hurt. Hopefully, Chuya wouldn't pressure him for answers, but knowing that loser, he definitely would. Maybe not instantly, but surely at some point soon he would. Well, that problem can be future Dazai's issue. Current Dazai needed to get ready for work. Chuya walked back into the room and stood to the side of the bed. Listen, I know you don't like people seeing you without your bandages, but I need to change them. And don't say you can do it yourself, 'cause your hand has a literal hole in it. Dazai didn't bother answering. Once Chuya set his mind on something, there was no other option. Dazai sat perfectly still, eyes closed tightly shut, as Chuya undid the bandages. He tried to ignore the feeling of being stripped, but even feeling his bare skin against the cold of the room was enough to make him uncomfortable. Chuya tried his best to not let his hands linger too long on Dazai's body. He had making the wrapping as secure as possible as his goal, but seeing the small flinches that would happen whenever his hand even lightly brushed against Dazai made him rush. It may have felt like an eternity to the both of them, but Chuya got the job done in under 15 minutes. Done, now go get dressed. I feel like some kind of fucking parent now. Chuya finished tightening the bandages on Dazai's hand. Chuya is the best parent ever. What a nice little chihuahua. Shut up. You're lucky that you're injured, otherwise, I'd punch you so hard you'll see God. Aw, maybe you're not a good parent then. I'm the best goddamn parent to walk the earth, so zip it and get to work. Dazai saluted Chuya. Once he got kicked in the shin, he actually did get ready to leave. Chuya has a strong kick. Once Dazai was standing at the door, ready to leave, Chuya handed him a brown paper bag. If I find out you didn't eat, I'll force feed you again. Dazai smiled. Of course, anything for you, Hatrak. Chuya huffed at the nickname but otherwise didn't comment. Whatever, bye, dumbass. Dazai looked down at Chuya, then he kissed him softly. Bye-bye. I'll see you later. With that, Dazai did what he did best, running away from any problems surrounding Chuya. Chuya couldn't even properly process what had happened. Stupid McCarroll, always pulling a disappearing act. Well, too bad, he'll have to talk eventually. Sooner rather than later, maybe Chuya would visit him at work. The asshole would never see that coming. Aizawa was already standing in the center of the room and lecturing. Dazai waved leisurely as he walked in. Maybe being 23 minutes late was some kind of war crime here, as he was given a very aggressive nod of acknowledgement from his co-teacher. Dazai smiled childishly as he stood next to Aizawa. He ruffled the elder's hair as if they were best buds, then went to go sit on the front desk. The class kinda just stared with their mouths open. Holy shit, did he just? Denki muttered to his seatmate, though he didn't finish his sentence since Aizawa glared into the poor kid's soul. Anyway, it looks like Dazai has decided to show up. You do know teachers are supposed to get here early? Right? Oh, Dazai said bluntly. Aizawa could not even think of a response to that. He sounded serious, but who even knows with that guy? Why do you look constipated? I was kidding. I overslept, sorry. Dazai playfully winked at him. Aizawa gagged. Whatever. Class, Aizawa turned his back to Dazai as he addressed the students. Since Dazai actually showed up, he'll be taking over for the rest of the class. It was clear on his face that he did not want Dazai teaching. He looked like he was one step away from choke slamming Dazai into the floor. Dazai got off the desk and took Aizawa's spot. I don't actually know or care very much about whatever you've been learning before I arrived. I'm pretty sure you guys know, I don't like to stick to the script of what should be a normal teacher. Don't worry though, Principal Nizu has approved all actions and actives that we will be doing. No, he didn't. Dazai had not even talked with the rodents since day one. I already informed you all that I'm planning to teach you how to use weapons. Luckily for us. A very lovely little Hatrak I know is gonna help. He's super good with knives. Don't tell him I complimented him though. I'll never live it down. Oh, please don't be shy to ask me for help or ask questions. Also, if the pacing is too fast, let me know. I want you guys to get the most out of this, so it's really helpful to get feedback from my students. My previous students didn't have too much of a struggle with my wording, but they were older than you guys. Don't be shy, Kay? I promise, I don't bite. Denki giggled quietly at the last line. Pust, Kirsch. Yeah. I bet Mino wishes Mr. Dazai does bite. Dazai decided to ignore the side talk. It's not that big of a deal for now. Anyone have questions? Doesn't have to be specific. Feel free to ask anything. If he was lucky, he could implement heavy mafia-style training onto them. Not too harsh, of course. He didn't want to get sued for being the reason these kids end up in therapy or a hospital. Using the verbal aspects would fit better since shooting kids with guns is definitely not allowed. As long as he wasn't too cruel and traumatizing, it would turn out well. He had to admit, being a mentor was fun. One-on-one was more to his tastes, but overall, the experience was something he enjoyed. Though, he wasn't quite sure as to why he liked doing it. He didn't really have a soft spot for children, nor did he have the mindset of helping the future generations, so why was it that he found it fun? Even when he was training Akutagawa, he was delighted to do it. Maybe it was the satisfaction of his subordinates becoming deadly forces with the help of his guidance. Or could it be that he liked to push people to their limit to see how they react? He didn't know, he wasn't sure. He didn't want to find out. If he knew the reason, it would take away the enjoyment. Atsushi was so sweet. It was such a huge switch from Dazai's previous student. Perhaps Dazai did have a soft spot for the human tiger. This was another thing he wasn't sure of. He originally only bothered to take Atsushi in because he was an orphan. No, not because Dazai actually cared to help orphans in need, but because Oda had done the same. Odasaku cared for orphans, so it would have made the man happy to see Dazai do the same. But when did Dazai mimicking Oda's actions become him getting truly attached? Cutting his thoughts off, he tuned back into the present. Kirishima, you can go first. Dazai clapped his hands together, slightly wincing at the pain from doing so. Stupid handhole. What, sir, before I ask, are you okay? 'Cause your hand is kinda bleeding. The redhead scratched the back of his neck as he spoke. Dazai looked at his hand and sure enough, blood was starting to seep through the bandages. Darn. Oops, don't worry. I sliced my palm while cooking dinner last night. Take it as a lesson, don't get distracted when using knives. Dazai motioned for Kirishima to speak. Oh, okay, I just wanted to ask if you have office hours already planned out? 'Cause I'm sure I'll need to visit when we officially start, huh? I'm not 100% set on the timing yet, but it'll most likely be after school for around 2 hours. I need to check with my partner to make sure Chuya will stay to help. All right, sir. This is really exciting. We've never done anything like this, like ever. Dazai laughed. I guess I'm just special. Anyone else want to ask something? If you can't think of anything right now, just ask during All Might's class. Dazai, sir. Ida raised his hand up high. Yes? The brunette answered lazily. Will you be giving us homework? And cue the loud groaning and mumbling disapproval. Geez, why'd you remind him? I swear to God I'm going to throw him out a window. He should just do everyone's homework if he's so desperate to get it. I know you're all going to be so devastated, but no, I'm not going to assign any homework. Don't think I won't though. I just gotta come up with the most perfect assignment. Oh, speaking of that, can you guys turn in that reflection writing I asked for before? Either now or during All Might's class. Doesn't matter which class you choose to hand it in during. Most of the class got up to hand their papers to him. Guess some of them would be speed writing it during other teachers' lectures. Awesome. Thanks guys, well, class is basically over. You can go. Technically it wasn't over for another 5 minutes, but who cares? Bye-bye. The class gave their farewells and left. Dazai turned to Aizawa. Did I do good? He asked in a sweet tone. I think they like me. Don't you think so? Aizawa didn't respond for a minute. He needed to collect his thoughts before saying anything he might regret. Yeah. You did good, he finally responded. He paused. Dazai Osamu, I don't trust you. Why not? Dazai grinned, his eyes turning dark. You came out of nowhere, get hired easily, somehow get the whole class to respect and like you almost instantly, and you have an aura of pure evil leaking out of you. It's not painting a very good picture of you. Dazai laughed loudly, almost in a fetal manner. Really? Aw, that's not nice to say. He pouted, soulless eyes accompanying the childish look. That's too bad, I thought we would be friends. After all, our quirks are so similar. I guess not similar enough then. Disappointing. Without further explanation, Dazai stuck his tongue out at him and bounced out of the room. He really needed to deal with his hand. The nurse's office would probably have bandages he could use. It would be super awkward to have to ask Chuya to bring him some, and it would also be weird to just walk around with blood stained on him. Societal norms were such a pain in the ass. People just mind their own business. Itchy, can't a guy just walk around with a bloody hand in peace these days? Totally unfair. It took a bit of looking, but Dazai finally found the nurse's office. He hadn't bothered to actually go check it out on his first day here. He sighed. Maybe this nurse won't be nosy and just let him get what he needs then leave, but that was unlikely. Doctors were always so annoying. The only doctor he could handle was Yasano. They both had disliking Mori in common, which was a great conversation topic. Yasano had such an amazing ability too. It really was a true gift. Most referred to all abilities as gifts. Ability users are known as gifted. Though, some abilities weren't gifts, more like nightmares. He could use Q as an example. The kid's ability was strong, but it was destructive not only to others but also to Q. Since they had to be harmed for their ability to work, they had razors taped to their body. They were unlucky even more, so that Mori was their caretaker. Even Dazai felt some sympathy towards the kid. He was so dangerous, but he was still just a kid. A kid with so much uncontrollable power. So far, the only thing that appeared to be able to spot Q's curse was no longer human. Mori must be so livid because of it. After all, Mori was still paranoid that Dazai would kill him and become boss. Some gifts were in the middle group, not as amazing as Yasano's but not as frightening as Q's. Kunikida had a good gift, Tanizaki did too. Those gifts could be used in a fight but also just for random, mundane things. Kunikida pretty much had an endless supply of pens, and Tanizaki could do cool magic tricks with his holograms. For where Dazai's ability lies on that scale, it's up for debate. Was his ability a true gift, or was it somewhat like a curse? Or was it in a middle ground? His ability was both versatile but also limited. He could use his ability against any gift. Whether it be a light tap to Atsushi's head in tiger form or Yasano being unable to heal him. But he was practically useless in combat. His hand-to-hand was never that good. Going against an opponent who was much stronger even without an ability was a bad idea. Therefore playing mind games and strategizing were his strengths. Dazai flicked himself on the forehead. the slight stinging sensation snapped him out of his thoughts. He had arrived at his destination. Dazai knocked on the door and waited for a few seconds for a response. The voice of an old lady answered. "Come in." Darn, it wasn't empty. Pushing the door open, Dazai strolled in. He took a quick look around, then headed over to where the voice came from. She was hella short. "Hello, ma'am." He greeted her kindly. The woman smiled warmly at him. "Oh my, I thought Midoriya had broken another bone." "You're the new bee, right?" she asked. Dazai nodded. Did that kid seriously break his bones so often that he was a frequent visitor? "I'm Dazai Osamu. It's a pleasure to meet you." He bowed to her. How polite. You can call me Recovery Girl or Shizenji. Mitchum, do you have any spare bandages? Please don't ask, please don't ask, please don't ask. Spare bandages? For what? Did a student get hurt? You could always just bring them here. Darn. No student is hurt. It's for me. Shizenji stared at him intently, trying to find some sort of injury on his body. Thankfully, Dazai had his coat on. "It's just my hand." He presented his blood-stained hand to her. Her eyes widened. "Let me change those for you. It could get infected." She forced him to sit on one of the beds, then went to grab her supplies. Dazai swung his legs back and forth as he waited. Removing his bandages on his hands wasn't that bad. Obviously, he'd prefer not to have any of his bandages taken off, but old ladies were always really pushy. Once she returned, she sat down in front of him. "All right, give me your hand." Dazai stuck his hand out again, watching her carefully. Shizenji unraveled the gaze slowly, mouth opening in shock. Oh yeah, he had a hole in his hand. Oops. How? How did this happen? She questioned. He didn't answer. His eyes flat as he gazed down at her. A loud silence passed. "I'm going to use my quirk on you. You'll be sleepy after, but the hole will close." No response. Recovery Girl puckered her lips and kissed his palm. Blue light flashed against her lips. Shizenji made a quiet noise of shock and moved away. "Sorry, I forgot to mention, my quirk is similar to Aizawa." "No quirk will work on me." He pulled his hand back and grabbed the bandages she placed on the bed next to him. He pulled his sleeve up a tiny bit and started to wrap his hand. Had she not been looking closely, she wouldn't have noticed the many bandages going up his arm. "Thank you." With a curt nod, he turned on his heel and left. Recovery Girl didn't even have time to form a response. Shizenji didn't know what to think of the interaction. She wasn't a psychologist in the slightest, but something was off with him. She wasn't sure if it was malice in him or just an immense amount of untreated mental issues. Should she inform the principal? No, as much as she respected Nizu, she had a feeling that the mouse would turn it into an experiment of some sort. What should she do? After some thinking, Shizenji decided to try and befriend Dazai. Maybe she could convince him to attend therapy or just learn about him and help as much as she could. Asking Aizawa about Dazai would be a good first step. After all, they did work in the same class. Aizawa had a bad feeling, a very bad feeling. He couldn't quite place where this feeling of unease was coming from, but if he had to guess, it would be from Dazai. He hadn't done anything yet, but he's been unnaturally compliant in his most recent lesson. He had never gotten such a horrible vibe or even first impression of a person until Dazai. He was so childish and carefree, yet so menacing and calculating. Pure villain material if you asked Aizawa. Speak of the devil, or it was think of the devil this time, and he shall appear. Dazai popped his head into Aizawa's office. "Hey, I have a question." The brunette walked in like he owned the place, plopping down on Aizawa's desk. A few beats of silence passed. "What?" He took the bait. "Well, I was curious, how annoyed would you be if I brought my own personal helper for my lessons?" Dazai fluttered his eyelashes flirtatiously, an obnoxious pout on his lips. Aizawa could feel his eyebrow twitch in annoyance. "Extremely." Dazai smiled widely. "Perfect. I'll let him know when he can come in to help. You're the best." He bounced up and bowed deeply. The respect in that action was seemingly non-existent. Once Dazai left, Aizawa groaned loudly. He could practically see the mess laying up ahead. He mentally placed his bets on Principal Nizu ignoring the suspicious actions in favor of entering a mind game with the suspect himself. He would never understand the fascination with mind games. It took too long to ensnare someone in a trap. Even so, playing them for fun was another level of pure confusion. As much faith as he had in the principal, Dazai Osamu should never be underestimated. He had a feeling that doing so would only lead to death. Even so, Aizawa figured he should at least try to talk some sense into Nizu. It never hurt to try. He slowly stood from his spot behind his desk, brushing invisible dust off his pants, and headed out. Maybe he was wrong and just overreacting, but it was better to be overly cautious than carefree and vulnerable. If nothing was wrong with Dazai, then Aizawa gave himself a headache for no reason. If there was something up with him, it would be worth the throbbing pain in his skull to protect his kids. He rubbed his forehead. He was going to age 10 times faster because of all this stress. Once at his destination, Aizawa knocked 3 times. He anxiously tapped his fingers on his thigh as he stood in nerve-wracking anticipation. Enter. Nizu's peppy voice snapped Aizawa back into reality, quite literally, as Aizawa jumped in slight shock from the sudden voice interrupting his thought process. He pushed the door open, walking in only to be met with sly eyes. Dazai's eyes. "Hey there." The man greeted, hands clapping together with a false smile accompanying it. "I wish we could talk, but I gotta get home, you know how it is. The wife is waiting." And as quickly as he appeared, he left, slipping out of the room with soft steps. "Aizawa. Good to see you, how's everything faring? Osamu was just telling me how interesting the class is." "Osamu? Now those two are on a first-name friendship?" "It's fine. I'm actually here to talk to you about Dazai." Nizu nodded, paws placing themselves in front of him. "Go on, it's always good to hear both sides." Aizawa did as told. Dazai Osamu is a suspicious person. He held eye contact with the rodent, portraying a confident character. "I'm aware." Nizu grinned slightly. "Doesn't that make it more interesting? He hasn't directly done any harm to us, but the underlying fear of an outsider is prominent. As well as the vibes he gives off, it's overall off-putting and, as you said, suspicious." Aizawa grinded his teeth together, a scowl forming. If you're aware he's suspicious and a potential threat, why let him in? Why let him teach? We should be investigating him, not letting him become a teacher." Aizawa crossed his arms, an expression of pure rage on his face. "Yes, he does act weird and has malice buried in him. Unfortunately, he has done nothing to us. Nothing we can prove or show, at least." The last part was more muted, a mumble to himself. "So, we're going to play the waiting game?" Aizawa's voice stayed strong. "I wouldn't call it a waiting game. After all, there is no waiting. Osamu was just here, as you can obviously tell." Nizu laughed lightly. "He asked to bring in a friend. A friend who is skilled hand-to-hand combat, knife usage and guns. If there is something we need to worry about, I'm sure this assistant will be the key to exposing it. Osamu is a man built on masks. It's hard, no, it's almost impossible to point out any lies or flukes on his end. I believe whoever is being brought in will slip up. No one is as good as Osamu, at least no one that I've met is." Aizawa didn't speak, neither did Nizu. Both had a lot of thinking to do. Dazai really was doing the most harm without doing a single thing. Breaking trust between teachers and students, a smart plan. Trust really is a strong weapon. The tense atmosphere was officially broken when Aizawa's phone began to ring. Nizu smiled. "Don't worry about all this, I'll handle it. You should pick up the call." The mouse hybrid spun around in his chair, dismissing the pro-hero with a wave of a paw. Aizawa nodded, eyeing the contact. I'll talk to you later." He wished Nizu a good afternoon and left the office. He didn't pick up the call. Actually, he stared at the number displayed on his screen. Still glaring at his phone, he walked out to his car. His phone buzzed with incoming texts. How the hell can he mute it? And why the hell did Nizu give Dazai his number? Now he has to deal with this pain in the ass on his days off too. Today went well. Or at least better than he thought it would. Dazai unlocked the door and opened it slowly. He was planning on being obnoxious but decided not to. He stepped in and hung his coat up, muttering about needing to wash it. Of course, he wasn't going to wash it, Chuya would. After all, Dazai would find a way to fuck it up. As he walked towards the bedroom, he stopped in front of the couch. Such a nice couch, It seems Chuya hadn't cleaned it yet. Or at least not fully. Maybe they should just throw it out. Blood stains and knife slashes were all over it. Dazai blankly stared at the piece of furniture. His mind was replaying the events that had recently taken place. He had a few holes in his memory, since he was floating in and out of consciousness. What would have happened if Chuya hadn't shown up? Would he have died? Maybe. He was bleeding a lot after all. But demons don't just die like that. It would be embarrassing for him, the youngest executive, to die from simple blood loss on his couch. He always managed to get out of near-death situations. Was that lucky? Maybe some. Dazai had a talent of somehow outliving those who had a goal in life. Oda was a prime example. He had so much to live for, so why did he have to die? Maybe if Dazai was faster, or if he hadn't bothered asking Mori for any type of backup, maybe Oda would still be alive. Even though he'd seen countless people die, killed plenty of people, seen life leave many sighs. Even though he's listened to the screams of pain and suffering, he's witnessed painful and gruesome deaths. He's heard hundreds of last words. Oda's death haunts him. Maybe it's because he had a relationship with Oda, but was that fair? Was it fair to value Oda's life over others? Oda's life over other of his friends? Oda over Ango? Over Chuya? He was selfish. He had no problem killing others with goals, dreams, and aspirations. He didn't have second thoughts about putting a bullet into a parent's head. He didn't care for the children sent out with bombs strapped to their chests. Would he care if those children were the orphans his dear friend cared for? He wasn't sure. Atsushi, would he care if it was Atsushi? Maybe he shouldn't ride that train of thought. Dazai flicked his forehead, then went to barge into the bedroom. Pulling the door open, Dazai turned the lights on. Chuya, the brunette called out, are you sleeping? Chuya, being the saint he is, groaned and chucked a pillow at Dazai. Not anymore, annoying ass stupid fucking. He started to list every curse word and insult he could think of. Chuya, that's not child-friendly. Shut it, your existence isn't child-friend. That's mean, Chuya's a mean. And Dazai is a dumbass. Chuya sat up on the bed, rubbing his eyes and yawning. Come here and turn the damn lights off. Dazai pretended to think about it for a solid 20 seconds until Chuya started to aim another pillow. He quickly switched off the lights and went to stand by Chuya's side. Yes, my dear Hatrak, he patted Chuya's head as one would a dog. One day, I'm going to bite your hand off like an actual dog. Dazai snorted and stuck his tongue out at him. Chuya rolled his eyes. He pulled Dazai's hand off and yanked the taller man into the bed. Dazai yelped, geez? Was that 2 times Chuya has caught him off guard? Chuya maneuvered himself so that both he and Dazai were wrapped up under the covers. Yes, he made Dazai the little spoon, what about it? Dazai hummed in comfort. It was weird. He'd never truly felt at ease with anyone. What was different about Chuya? His mind came to a halt when he felt Chuya kiss his cheek. Turn your head. Dazai did as told. A soft pair of lips made contact with his own. Just like the first time, Dazai malfunctioned. His face burned red all the way up to his ears. Chuya didn't comment. He just placed another kiss on Dazai's cheek and grinned. What? You don't know how to kiss, he teased. Dazai glared at his partner playfully. He moved to straddle Chuya's lap. Hush. I can kiss better than you can. Surari, so prove it. I will just watch. Even in tender moments like these, their odd dynamic always showed. Dazai would have to tell Chuya about teaching later. He was distracted right now. For once, Chuya was awake first. He groaned and reached over Dazai to check for the time on his phone. 7:35 p.m., not that late. Chuya looked towards Dazai and poked his cheek. Hey, Osamu, wake up. He shook Dazai by the shoulders until the brunette whacked his hands off. I'm sleeping, can't talk. Chuya could feel his eyebrow twitch in irritation. Get up, don't you have scheming to do or something? Well, now Dazai was awake. Chuya? You're right. He hopped off the bed and snatched his phone up. He hummed to himself as Chuya watched from the bed, now sitting up. What? Chuya asked. Did something happen? Dazai laughed childishly. Everything is perfect. Don't worry your tiny head about it. Chuya chose to ignore the jab about his height, barely managing to tell it was just Dazai trying to distract him. Explain what it is you're doing. Dazai whined loudly. Fine. Oh, by the way, I need you to join me with teaching, he said casually, throwing his body onto the bed. Chuya opened his mouth to yell but quickly snapped it shut. He glared at Dazai and gestured for him to go on. Well, my dear midget, I'm teaching those kiddos how to use weapons. And you're decent with knives? Decent? I'm way better than you are. Sorry anyway. Chuya huffed in annoyance while Dazai snickered. I already spoke to the mouse. Oh, did you know their principal is literally a rat? Like a rat, not Fyodor. Chuya laughed quietly at that. So it's Fyodor in his true form? Dazai nodded, brown hair flopping around as he did. You can come tomorrow. It'd like them to meet you and talk before actually training. Dazai stood up. Chuya could sense the mood switch. His eyes seemed darker, duller. Chuya didn't comment on it though, being semi-used to it. You have a more aggressive but caring personality. I've already gotten the students to respect me as a teacher and I am building one-on-one relations with them. I'd like you to focus on befriending the other teachers, specifically Aizawa and All Might. I've already put Aizawa on edge. He has no actual proof of negative intentions but he quite openly does not trust me, which is fine. It's not as fun if everyone likes me. All Might is a bit uneasy around me, though he seems the type to forgive too quickly. Befriending Midoriya Izuku will grant me access to All Might's kindness. I have reason to believe that Midoriya is heavily connected to All Might. Their quirks are a little too similar. So, if the green bean likes me and trusts me, All Might would feel inclined to agree. Like I said, you're aggressively caring. An odd combination, but Aizawa would be drawn to it. He is more of a passive-aggressive type caring person. He acts indifferent but would lay his life down for the class. All Might is, well, he's an idiot. You can probably become besties with him easily. Now, regarding the students, I'm focusing most on Bakugo Katsuki, Midoriya Izuku and Mina Ishido. Their quirks are powerful. Ida Tenya has very narrow morals which also piqued my interest. I want you to befriend Todoroki Shoto, Denki Kaminari and Uraraka Achiko. Uraraka actually has a gravity quirk? How fun! Chuya nodded. Another gravity-based ability? Well, quirk? Whatever, it'll be interesting either way. For the villains, that is a secret. Just know they might attack the school sooner rather than later. It'll be a good way to prove your loyalty to you today. Dazai snickered. They both knew where Chuya's loyalty lay. All right, I got it. Chuya stayed seated, staring up into Dazai's cold eyes. Dazai didn't move, the more Chuya thought about it. Dazai fit this. It looked natural for him to have a blank face, natural to have bloodlust lurking in him. But why? One thing Chuya really wanted to know was, what happened? Why is Dazai like this? What is his story? He doubted he'd get any answers now if not ever. Maybe he should ask Mori? It is an invasion of privacy, but he is mafia after all. Dazai snapped out of his trance. He didn't say anything, just got on top of Chuya to cuddle him. I'm asleep now, so He put his finger up to Chuya's mouth as he hushed him. Good night. Quietly opening the door, Dazai slipped out. It was around 2:30 a.m., perfect time for sneaking around. He made sure Chuya was asleep first. He really did sleep like the dead. Dazai wandered around the street mindlessly. He had his hands shoved in his mafia coat, gripping his gun. Now, where was this location? Honestly, villains are so complicated with their lairs or whatever. It was actually smart to have their meeting point at a restaurant. No one would question a lot of people going in at once or even at different times. Dazai walked up to the front. Hello, he waved. The waitress that was greeting people smiled at him. Hello, sir. Do you have a reservation? Dazai hummed, I think so, can you check? She nodded and asked for the name, Tamura. The woman's eyes widened a bit. Right this way, sir. Dazai followed her to the back. She opened a door and bowed her head at him when he entered. Dazai laughed quietly. Fancy? It was an elevator disguised as a closet. The elevator rumbled and began to move down. You are cool, he muttered to himself. Once the elevator stopped, Dazai stepped out looking around. Hello? Geez, you guys are horrible hosts? Hosts? This isn't a party. Oh, there he was. Shigaraki, the leader of the group. Close enough, don't you think? Dazai shrugged, holding his hand out for a handshake. Shigaraki made a sound of confusion. Did he forget Dazai's quirk or something? Dazai kept his hand out, waiting. Shigaraki's eyebrows furrowed. He grabbed Dazai's hand firmly, shaking it. The bandages around his hand turned to dust, but his hand was still intact. Hey, good thing I have extra. Dazai began to wrap his hand up with the spare he had in his pocket. Shigaraki huffed, "Come with me." Dazai did as told, no need to press the guy's buttons yet. The two entered a poorly lighted room with worn-out couches placed around a small coffee table. Sitting there were the main members of the league, Toga Himiko, Dabi and Kurojuri. Dazai didn't speak to them. He plopped down on the couch next to Dabi. Dazai Osamu, tell us what you know about the security of the U.A and Class 1's schedule. Why? He only said one word and already had a hand on his throat, and not in the good way. Dazai looked down at Dabi's bony hands, making a face of disgust at the staples holding the skin together. That has to be unsanitary. I know a doctor that could fix you up. He winked as he yanked Dabi's hand off. You're not my type, sorry. Now standing, he swung his arms back and forth. No need to get so angry over a question. Shaking his head, he continued, true criminals know how to keep calm. How to be threatening without getting violent, to smooth talk your way out of things, to have a silver tongue. Dazai sighed, I'm sure you guys can learn. Shigaraki stood silently. He appeared to be thinking as his hand came to scratch roughly at his neck. Dazai held back a comment about eczema cream. We are planning to infiltrate the U.A and attack the main class. We have two teams, one will break into the school and look for health records and the other will attack the class off campus. Dazai hummed in thought, health records? Yes, if we can gain access to those, we'll know all the injuries they've obtained and how. Dazai's face twisted into a sadistic grin. He clapped his hands together. It looks like you're not as dumb as I thought. Now, if you allow me, I can look over that information and tell you which spots would hurt most and any noticeable weak points. Stepping towards Shigaraki, he patted his head softly, running his long fingers through the tangled hair. I can already tell this will be fun. I'll send you a message with a plan to get in and out of the school and the schedule of upcoming field trips. It was a bit of a shock for Shigaraki to have someone touch him with such kindness? Tenderness? He didn't know, and the others were shocked to see someone petting their leader. Hopefully you guys can come up with a good battle strategy. I have to be a good little teacher and not let my students get hurt. Chia was bored, sue him. He never thought he'd miss having to get up at Devil's Hour to go run errands for Mori. Dazai was also taking for fucking ever to get back. He had spent a good 40 minutes sharpening the same knife as he waited. It would be a good idea to do a lesson plan or something, but he had a feeling Dazai would annoy him and say his plan sucks, therefore fuck that. Dazai can do it. When is that idiot coming back? The redhead flopped onto his back on the bed. It was weird to be so domestic. God, he felt like he was a married man. Marriage was something he also never thought of. Mafia members don't have time for that. What would it even be like to get married to Dazai? He shivered at the thought. That walking menace would definitely start teasing him if he found out Chuya was seriously contemplating marriage. Besides, someone would get into a fight at their wedding, definitely Aku and that tiger kid. He wondered, did Dazai miss them? The ADA to be exact, he had made a little family there, or was it fake? Did Dazai ever think of him like this? He couldn't really picture Dazai daydreaming about a wedding or even a date. Definitely not thinking up future children. The idiot would daydream 100 ways Chuya could die or something. Where to? Chibi. Chuya groaned loudly. What? He yelled back. How did he not hear the door opening? Stupid Dazai. Stupid, sneaky, quiet idiot. Dumb, lanky noodle-armed brat. Annoyingly pretty bastard. Dazai took his shoes off quickly. He threw them next to the door and went to their room. Chuya. No need to yell. He snickered at the louder yells of annoyance from Chuya. Did you miss me? No. Good. After a mini staring contest, Chuya got up and dragged Dazai to the kitchen. Sit. Dazai raised an eyebrow in confusion but did as told. Quickly, he heated up some soup and placed it in front of Dazai. Eat it, I will not hesitate to force feed you. Pouting, Dazai picked up the spoon and began to eat. Good, now, tell me what happened with the league. Chuya sat down next to him. Nothing much, they want to ambush the class and steal health records. I would have just stolen the records first and waited a bit, but whatever. Now the school will be on alert 'cause of the records getting snatched. Not very smart, are they? Chuya nodded. Are you going to help them attack the class? Dazai shook his head, shoving another spoonful in his mouth. I'll map out how to steal the records without alerting anyone, but I have a feeling they'll change something and ruin it. But it's fine. I'm certain the real leader is keeping an eye on me. HM? Isn't that bad? Dazai shrugged. It goes both ways. Good that I'll be able to rank up and talk to the guy sooner than normal, but bad if they find out our background. Dazai pushed the bowl away, only 1/3 eaten. Chuya didn't say anything about it. He just dumped the bowl in the sink and came back. I'm assuming you made lesson plans? Dazai whined. The hat rack is working me to the bone. Chuya smacked his shoulder. So you did, what is it? Dazai crossed his arms. Ichi. Just act the same as you do to train your subordinates, but not as scary. Are you serious? Did? Yeah. I bet you traumatized a kid already. No comment. Chuya shook his head and pursed his lips. All right. I trust you. Dazai's eyes widened a bit. Trust. Chuya trusted him? He hadn't actually heard Chuya say it so casually. Hey, Dazai. Chuya leaned forward and kissed him. Take a shower. I can change your bandages if you want. Dazai felt his ears turn red. Yes, thank you. Chuya looked at him with adoration. Dazai's usual dead, blank eyes had a bit of light in them. Hopefully. The light grows. Dazai pecked Chuya's lips before rushing to the bathroom. I'm taking a bubble bath. Don't splash the water everywhere. No promises. Dazai nervously tapped his foot. Sitting on the edge of the bed with no bandages on was uncomfortable. Chuya was kneeling in front of him, unwrapping a bundle of fresh ones. That was he born with them joke always got a chuckle out of him, not due to it really being so funny but because sometimes he wishes he was. People do tend to be kinder to those with visible disabilities or illnesses. Maybe Mori never would have interacted with him if he had been a pampered kid with people all around him. He was glad that Chuya hadn't asked about all the scars he had, whether it be the self-inflicted ones or not. Thankfully, he also hadn't asked about the couch incident. Though, he could see the curiosity and concern in Chuya's eyes. As much as he doesn't want to be confronted, Chuya would end up doing it eventually. He was too caring and kind-hearted to pretend it did not happen or act like everything was normal. Dazai flinched violently. Chuya had touched his upper thigh with no warning. He muttered a quiet sorry before starting to slowly wrap the bandages. His fingers lightly traced some of the darker scars on his inner thigh, eyes focused on them. If he wasn't feeling paranoid and stripped of his only stabilizer, Dazai would have made a joke and asked if Chuya had a thigh fetish. Chuya rubbed his thumb on the freshest scar, the stab wound. Dazai stared intensely, carefully watching him. Dazai! Chuya broke the quiet atmosphere, his hands still hovering over the mark. Dazai didn't answer, his eyes were unfocused, his hands shaking. Osamu? Please, he didn't elaborate but they both knew what he meant. I don't. Dazai's voice trembled. Chuya looked up at him, silently pleading for an answer, some kind of response. Can't. I just he started. Chuya shook his head. Hey, don't push yourself, Kay? Dazai just nodded in confirmation. Chuya broke eye contact, going back to the original task. He picked up the bandages that he had placed on the floor, stretching Dazai's leg out, he began to properly wrap them. Starting at the top of his leg and working down to his ankles. Finishing the first leg, he moved on to the other. Chuya made a mental note of how some of these scars appeared very similar to what a slice from a scalpel looked like. He hummed in approval of his work, then stood up to bandage Dazai's top half and arms. He motioned for Dazai to stretch his arms. The brunette made sure to hold out the arm without the knife stab on the palm. Chuya was quick and careful, not too tight but not too loose. He did the same for the other arm, only stopping for a split second at his hand. Lift your arms. Chuya reached around and wrapped up Dazai's chest and upper abdomen. Is it okay for me to touch your neck? He asked sincerely. Dazai stayed silent for a moment before shaking his head. Chuya didn't let his disappointment show as he handed the bandage to Dazai. The brunette thanked him in a meek tone before starting. It was almost mechanical, the way he put them on. Not stuttering in his movements or making any mistakes, not even small ones. He had even cut the piece he used at the perfect length the first time. While he did that, Chuya put away all the supplies as fast as possible, not wanting to leave Dazai alone for long. Dazai had put a shirt on and long pajama pants, now laying down on his side, clutching his hand to his chest. Chuya poked his shoulder as he got onto the bed. "Hey Osamu?" Dazai looked over. Chuya fiddled with his fingers, obviously a bit flustered. "Thank you." Dazai gave him a confused look. "For what?" Chuya rolled his eyes, a tiny smile on his face. "Thank you for trusting me." "Chuya," Dazai turned to face him. "Chuya, you're truly the only person I trust. I would trust you with anything." Chuya's cheeks turned cherry red. "Same. I mean, when I first saw you again, I was angry. I felt like you betrayed me, not just the mafia. But I would still put my life in your hands. Corruption, it can kill me, using it is always a huge risk, but I know you'll stop me before anything fatal happens." Chuya huffed a small laugh. "Osamu?" Dazai once again answered with moving closer to Chuya, prompting the ginger to wrap his arms around his waist. Are we like dating now?" Chuya's thumb tenderly traced random shapes on Dazai's hip. Having Chuya's hands on him was nice, his hands were warm. Though, it was a different story if he didn't have his main accessory on. "Yeah? Only if you want, I know keeping me around is a stressor on its own." Chuya bit Dazai's ear. "Hush, I already put up with your dog comments. I think I'll be fine." Dazai whined. "You slobbered all over me, bad dog." Chuya kissed his ear. "I'm so sorry, please forgive me for slobbering on your precious ear." Dazai snorted. "Well, I forgive you, I guess." He flicked Chuya's nose. "You are such a brat, you noodle-armed loser." Dazai simply stuck his tongue out at Chuya and snuggled closer to him. The skin contact, well, was it really? More like bandage on skin contact. Either way, it was nice to have someone being so careful with him. "Chibi, I'm definitely going to annoy Aizawa even more than I do with Kanikita. I'll keep him in my prayers. Will you though?" "Hush, let me feel a little bad for the dude." "Okay, only a little. Like only 0.0001%. Brat. Short." Chuya held back the urge to bite his ear again. "I'm sleeping, can't hear you." Dazai pouted. "Good night, don't drool on me again." "I don't drool, whatever you say, dog boy G-night." Aizawa huffed. He couldn't sleep at all because of one person. Today was the day Dazai was to bring in his assistant, and yes, Aizawa was extremely worried. He really hoped Principal Nizu had everything under control after all. Dazai was already a highly suspicious person, who knows what kind of people he interacts with. Definitely not the type of people that should work with young heroes. Wrapped up in his sleeping bag, Aizawa relished in the peacefulness of listening to the chatter of his class. Everything felt and sounded normal. Well, it did. The door slapped open and guess who? Dazai, Osamu, and a short redhead? Aizawa opened his eyes and sat up. "Huh?" was the only thing he could manage to say in response. Dazai waved obnoxiously his partner, maybe? Honestly, who knows? Scoffed and pinched his side. The ginger rolled his eyes at Dazai's whining, walking up to Aizawa. "Hey, I'm not Harachuya, call me Chuya though." He held out a gloved hand, face blank besides a small smile. Aizawa narrowed his eyes as he reached out and shook his hand. The vibe this man had compared to Dazai was vastly different. Unlike the brunette, this man's eyes held emotions, passionate, determined. His smile appeared sincere with no harmful intent behind it. Unlike the other one, he was a true wolf in sheep's clothing. Dazai's smile held so much mockery, danger, and cruelty in it. Dazai's face was once again unreadable. Aizawa had glanced over at him, noticing that he was still standing by the door. He suppressed a shiver. "Class, as you can tell? Dazai's assistant for his portion of the class is here." Chuya waved from his side. "I'll let them explain whatever it is that they're planning." Aizawa stepped to the side, sitting down at his desk. He wanted to properly watch this lesson, to get a better feel on Chuya and just due to an overall worry that one of his students would get hurt. Dazai clapped his hands together, drawing the attention away from his partner and to him. We will be teaching you guys how to properly handle a weapon as well as improving your fighting technique without use of your quirk. Chuya stayed silent, standing at Dazai's side, almost like an attack dog of some sort. Before we can actually get to the fun part, I want you guys to get a good understanding on different types of weapons to find the one that will benefit you most. As an example, let's use myself and my dear Chuya. I prefer guns while Chuya is a fan of knives. Can anyone guess why? Sir, I have an answer. Kaminari raised his hand. Dazai nodded. Go ahead, I don't think you've spoken before in my class? Right? Kaminari rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. No, but I have an answer. So, your quirk is, like, not action-based, right? So, using a gun can let you fight without getting near your opponent. You could hide somewhere and snipe their ass. Kaminari pointed finger guns at Dazai. And, Chuya cut him off. Call me Chuya? With a nod, he continued, I know Chuya's quirk, but it's probably hands-on, so he needs to be close to the villain. So, because of that, a knife is better for him. Chuya looked rather impressed. Yeah, that's pretty much spot on. He commented, giving the student a thumbs up. That slimy mackerel is shit at combat. He's more of a sneaky, conniving bastards type. Aizawa, along with the students, held back any comments about Chuya's language. Chuya, I told you no bad words. Heroes don't use such vulgar language. Dazai went to flick Chuya's shoulder but was met with a harsh glare from the redhead. Now, I want you guys to think of a weapon that would suit you best. Draw and label it as well as you can. Chuya, with minimal help from Dazai, handed out blank papers to everyone. You have 20 minutes. You can talk to each other and move seats if needed to brainstorm. Start. Psst, Deku, Uraraka tapped her friend's shoulder. What weapon are you thinking of? As soon as it was allowed, the whole class shifted to sit with their friend groups. Oh, well, I'm not too sure. Maybe something I can put on my hands? To make my punches harder. What about you? He laughed awkwardly, bringing his pencil up to his lips to chew on it. A knife, maybe? I dunno. I never thought about anything like this before, she pouted, crossing her arms. Todoroki spoke up. His voice scared them both as they didn't even notice him show up. Ida was also now sitting at a desk facing them. If you use a knife, you could slash at a villain's legs so you can use your quirk on them without them trying to run away. His voice was dull as ever as he talked. Ooh, you're smart. She slapped him on the back cheerfully. What about you guys? Ida? I have no clue. My quirk doesn't benefit from a weapon plus don't guns and knives seem like a villain-only thing? Ida's eyebrows scrunched up. At least I think so. Maybe I'm overreacting. Todoroki shrugged. Well, there is a pro who is pretty much a walking gun. Ida rolled his eyes. That is different. It's part of his quirk to use those. Midoriya chose now to butt in. What do you guys think about Chuya? He had his notebook open, a sloppy sketch of Chuya drawn and blank spots to write about him. He seems nice. Todoroki didn't add more than that. Well, he kinda looks annoyed at Dazai. Do you think they'll fight? Uraraka asked. Dazai doesn't get along with Aizawa-sensei there. How weird, she continued. I'm sure they won't fight. After all, Nakahara-san was selected by Dazai-sen to come in. Ida said confidently. Midoriya nodded. Why yeah, he's right. Aizawa-sensei doesn't really like anyone, so it's not that weird. Uraraka shrugged. Valid? She tapped her pen on her sheet. How do you draw a knife? Bakubro. What are you gonna draw? Kirishima hovered over his friend's shoulder, completely ignoring any concept of personal space. Get the fuck off of me. Mina snorted from her seat as expected. Bakugo lost his shit again. Sorry dude. Kirishima held his hands up and stepped back. Sue, what are you drawing? Bakugo glared at him. None of your business. He moved his desk to face away from him, ignoring the question. That's mean, Bakugo. No way to treat your super awesome and amazingly perfect friends. Mina declared loudly while pouting, Kaminari bursting into laughter next to her. Yes, Sparky. Kirishima snickered as well, trying to muffle his laugh by covering his mouth. One day, I will find a way to throw all of you into a shark-infested ocean. Bakugo growled out, small explosions bouncing off of him. Kaminari winced. Aren't you just so creative? Anyway, I drew this, you know those water guns that kids play with? Those, but instead of water that gets shot out, it's acid. I know, I'm a genius. Mina bowed dramatically after holding up her design. I was going to say it's shit, but it's not. So good job, I guess. Bakugo pointed his pencil at her. But mine is better, he declared. Heh, I doubt it, show us. The blonde slammed his drawing down in front of his friends. A couple seconds passed as they stared in silence. Ooh, what is it? Kirishima asked. It wasn't a bad drawing, but it looked way too complicated for him to comprehend. It's a flamethrower powered by my sweat. So I can burn all of you losers to ash. Bakugo snatched his paper and folded it neatly. Well, good idea. Please don't light me on fire. Kaminari gave Bakugo a thumbs up with a shaky smile. Shut the fuck up, you lighting McQueen wannabe. So, Chuya, thoughts? Dazai was sitting on the floor in the front of the room with Chuya standing next to him. Why are you, actually never mind. Chuya sat down next to him. Akutagawa would be extremely offended that you even spent a second trying to teach them. Dazai waved his hand. That doesn't count. That kid would feel that way over anything. Chuya scoffed. Okay, Mori wouldn't even consider hiring them. Well, maybe as bait or something, but they're too hard-headed for him. I doubt they'd do well at the agency either. I mean, Kyuka is considered a villain here. Yasano too, and the president as well, plus our work methods are, questionable. Dazai laid his head on Chuya's shoulder. Should I give them the guns when All Might is around? The mafioso grinned. Hell yes. It'll be funny. I bet he'll start yelling and trying to lecture you. The two of them giggled like little kids. The mental image of the #1 hero trying to confiscate guns from high schoolers was way too good. I think he'll give a speech, a long one. I hope the fuck not. Listening to you talk is enough for me. Hatrak is a bully, a tiny and mean one. I'm going to strangle you. Kinky.